Okay. Calling Councillor Paulson. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us for our regular meeting of council, Monday, March 11th at 2 p.m. I will call our meeting to order and recognize that we're holding our meeting on the unceded territories of the Sechot and Hupachesset First Nations. Councillors, are there any late items? Seeing none. City Clerk, any late items?
Just one, Madam Mayor, and it's under correspondence H3A from Roland Smith.
Great. Okay, then we have an agenda in front of us. Would somebody like to move approval?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Councillor Haggard?
Yes, I vote yes.
Thank you. You have to vote on every motion.
Okay.
And next on to adoption of minutes, we have the minutes from the special meeting of council held at 6:30 p.m. on February 19th, minutes of the special in-camera meeting held at 12:30 on February 25th, minutes of the regular council meeting held at 2 p.m. on February 25th, and minutes of the budget meeting held at 6 p.m. on February 25th. Would somebody like to move adoption?
Move to adopt.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions or comments on the minutes? All in favor? Carried. Okay, that brings us to public input period. Come on up, Pete.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council.
Thank you. And if you don't mind,
I'm
just
Pete
state your name and address.
Pete
just for the
Geddes,
record.
Maple Street. Okay, I'm here to talk to you or explain some of us that are working on the number 7 steam engine. We have a group together that's working on it, and I'm sort of the mouthpiece for it for some of it. What we'd like to request is your support in the form of acting as a reference in our application for grants or in seeking donations to get the steam locomotive back in service. We also request consideration for grants under any funding programs that the city is aware of or involved with. The Industrial Heritage Society has taken the lead in this project, and with a dedicated group of volunteers. Since the repair started in September, we've received more than $100,000 worth of donated labor from the Boilermakers. We're now at a point in the rebuild that we must obtain materials, tubes and plate metal, to replace the damaged sections of the boiler. The costs are much lower than those quoted in some reports on social media. Like there's been people out there flipping out big numbers. And we believe that we can have this thing operational a lot less than that. And what we're asking for is some help to get this thing operational. We're not operational, but we're not mechanically, we want it running. We're not asking to put the thing back in service. But we realize that if we don't keep these Boilermakers on side now and we're able to get the materials to keep them going, this thing's not going to run next year either. It's that point right now. And we're asking for maintenance funding, not for operational funding. And that's for the steam engine. Also, I'd just like to remind you that we need some sort of a maintenance budget for the tracks and things, because if no work is done on the tracks, like vegetation or replacement of ties or whatever, this year, there won't be enough money or time to do it next year. So it's something that we're asking for your consideration, that we can carry on with some of this stuff. And that's basically what I'm here for, just to push that a little bit. So if you have any questions.
Thank you. So we don't take questions at this part,
Okay.
but we do have a delegation on this topic, so we will weave this into the conversation.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Would any other members of the public like to speak? Seeing none. Okay. So we'll move on to delegations, and our first delegation is the Mount Arrowsmith Rotary Club, in attendance to discuss the proposed canopy roof project at Victoria Quay. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Larry McGifford. It's been a number of years since I've been up at a podium and the microphone here in City Hall. I have with me today, I'm a city resident. I live at 2492 Anderson Avenue. I have here with me today other members of my Rotary Club. We have Pam Craig, Joe Lamoureux, and I was looking to see if there's anybody else. But it's a delegation is how we see this. So we are the Rotary Club of Port Alberni Arrowsmith. So I don't know how anybody got Mount Arrowsmith into there, but we can certainly change that. I feel honored to be here today representing my Rotary Club and talking a bit about a project at Victoria Quay. Specifically, a roof to be constructed over one of the existing viewing decks. We all know Victoria Quay is considered a pinnacle point of interest and destination in this city and has been for many years, bringing our citizens and tourists alike to the area to take in the tremendous and awesome scenery. I was going to do a calculation of how many trillions of cubic meters of water have passed by the viewing deck, but I thought pretty high. And without a doubt, and I'm sure you all agree, the deck has been very well used and continues to be used on almost a daily basis, particularly when the weather is not rainy or snowy. Just a bit of background, in 2003, the Rotary Club of Port Alberni Arrowsmith provided funding to the city of Port Alberni for the original viewing deck back in 2003. And at that time, a recognition plaque was put up in place, and I believe it was one of the typical era, and it was just a piece of, looks like tin with some writing on it, with a piece of plexiglass over the top, with a whole bunch of wood screws in it to hold it on. Things have changed. So, moving ahead, it's been used a lot, and there's been some maintenance put in it, and I believe the city is responsible for that. But as of today, or a few months ago, this project was considered to be timely, as there are some general maintenance issues to do. And our club was considering a project in the community that was away from the Rotary Arts District, because we are the sponsor for the Rotary Arts District, and we've been that way for 10 years now. So we say the club membership thought it's best if we do another project maybe in Northport. So along came Mr. Goodrow in contact with us. And he wanted to find out if we were interested in changing the plaque, which was the old style, to a new style. And that started this whole conversation. And the club agreed to go to the new style plaque, which is the same as what you see in a lot of the benches and that around town. So that is bought and paid for, and it's sitting on a shelf somewhere. But through discussion with Mr. Goodrow, there was some conversation about a roof going over the top of the viewing deck. And so we'd have to take that back to the club. It's not something that the president could decide upon. So I asked a question, or three questions. One, is it really doable? And Mr. Goodrow said, absolutely. I asked him if he had any design drawings that I could take to the club members to let them see. He says, that can't be done until there's a commitment to move forward. And of course, due diligence, how much is a roof going to cost? So, understanding the experience of Mr. Goodrow, he gave us a range of what he thought the cost would be, and we went to the upper limits of that so we could put forward. So what started as a discussion to upgrade the funding acknowledgement plaque now turned into a possible roof over the top. And preliminary discussions, Mr. Goodrow provided some visionary concepts to allow more opportunity for the viewing deck to be used during inclement weather conditions that can happen throughout the year. So just don't think about the rain in December and January. We can have quite heavy rainstorms in June, July, and August when the temperature is up. So it would give the tourists and citizens that are down there some refuge out of the rain while still enjoying the outdoors. The Rotary Club membership believed that as the original funding was provided by our club for this deck, it made sense now to provide new funding to further improve the viewing deck's use for the good of the community. And we looked at the 6 focuses of Rotary and the projects that are done around the world, and we looked at the economic and community development as a fit for this project here in our community. We feel that if it was roofed, there would be more opportunity for people to go there. They would see change, they would see upgrading and what have you. So that we looked at that, we plugged it into what we look at when we assess projects. In order to make this proposal move forward with the acquisition of working drawings and construction materials, we had to make a commitment to the city. So we looked at the $15,000, and we thought, well, you can give them $100 and say we'll get the rest when the project's done, but we didn't. We made out a check, and it was as a result of the club discussion, and we presented the check to the city a number of months ago, and for $15,000, and that's where it sits in the safekeeping of the city. So the $15,000 for the project is there, and I would certainly be willing to answer any questions, but just remember, Rotarians are known as people of action. So, any questions?
Well, thanks very much for coming. I will open this up to council questions. Councillor Paulson.
Just a quick question on the total value of the project itself. Or is $15,000 the full project, or are we talking 20 or 25?
No,
or?
my understanding, $15,000 will cover putting a roof on the viewing deck as it sits now.
Check.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Poon.
Would we be responsible for the maintenance of it going forward then, once it's been erected?
I think as in most cases where these types of projects are done for the city, okay, the city takes on that responsibility after it's built. The city's would be building it, so the money is put to them, but they would take on the responsibility for that.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments, Councillor Haggard, did you have any comments?
I just wanted to thank the Rotary Club for their donation to the community of Port Alberni.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll just echo that. We're excited to see this project keep moving, and I think you're right. It will add a great feature to what's already at Victoria Quay. So thanks very much for your time and for coming to talk to us about it.
You're welcome. If I could just add one thing, or a couple of things, please. And this is not in reference to the roof over the viewing site there. Just real quick, the Rotary Arts District banner painting. We've had it. This is our 10th anniversary of doing that, and we've had an exceptional year. And unless there's a glitch in our system, we will have them up into the lamp standards here on Argyle Street prior to May 25th.
Great.
And our mural project down on the Canadian Alberni Engineering is out for request for proposal right now, and we're waiting to hear back from artists on that. So,
Excellent.
okay,
Well, thank you to the Rotary Club and all that you're doing in the community. That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks. Okay, our second delegation is Dr. Paul Hasselback, our medical health officer. Welcome, Dr. Hasselback.
Your Worship and members of Council, it's a pleasure to be here and nice to see some old faces and some new faces, and also to the administration and your honored guests. I am your medical health officer, and about once every 4 years, or at least one selection round, it's of value for me to come back and remind you what it is that I do and what it is that you need to do. Just the center button. Now I'm in trouble. Okay, thank you. Health is often seen just as health services, but clearly one of the roles that I play is that health takes in a whole bunch more I'd like to think of it as something that's more than just even the physical, mental, and social well-being, and extending now into how does a group or individuals respond to their environment, realize their aspirations, and satisfy their needs. And truly, when someone or a community is healthy, those three characteristics really come across. And if we start using that definition more and more, we'll begin to understand that it's not just about health services, it's not about deficits in well-being, but very much about how to thrive. A nice way to think of this is that in the past we used to talk about diseases, and most people are still fairly familiar with these diseases. And then sometime around the turn of the century, we were talking more about risk factors and trying to reduce those risk factors, tobacco, alcohol, even our social engagement with each other. But more recently, in the last decade or so, we've really been focusing in on what are now referred to as the determinants of health, a set of characteristics that are predisposing factors that often are outside health or outside personal choice and really affect our choices as individuals, and subsequently from those choices to engage in certain risk factors, we end up with a very complex web of, well, we know economic status is really important. How does that actually affect something like arthritis? And yes, there's a correlation. And yes, if we want to address the issues of arthritis, we would want to be looking at all those determinants. But I like a slightly simpler model here to think about. We're all on an uphill journey, and that journey is called aging. And we're pushing a pretty stiff ball going up. That ball is of a different size depending on a few characteristics, but the slope of that hill is really affected by characteristics in our environment that we don't have a lot of control over at this point in time. And that may include poor housing, or may include inadequate access to good food and nutrition, or environmental health concerns. Now, both yourselves as council and myself as a medical health officer have very clearly defined legislative responsibilities. I think they're appended at the end of this presentation, and I won't be sharing with them. Other than that, you have a couple of roles. One is to identify and report out on health hazards. And the second important one is that you're supposed to listen to me. Doesn't mean that you have to follow what I say, but you have to listen to me. So occasionally I will send you communications of advice. Clean air bylaws is one that comes to mind, and you should actually respond to that in some fashion. There are other things that go into policy making, and that's your job, and I really do respect the role of governance bodies. But one of the roles that I bring to you is that health voice that needs to be built into policy decisions and policy making. There are other specific activities both under the community charter and the public health regulation in terms of the process. Rarely is that an issue for councils to be aware of. There are a variety of other roles that I can be of assistance to councils with, and I've listed a whole bunch of them there, but generally speaking, if you're not quite sure who to ask and it's got something to do with health, it's okay to ask me. Often I'll tell you I have no idea, but I'll get the right answer for you. Okay, and that's fine. That's part of what we can do. There are other people, and there's some great people in this community in Port Alberni that are engaged in the health and health services. It's fine to go knocking on their doors as well, but if you're still not sure, if you're looking for the particular aspects, it's okay to come knocking on my door as well. Main areas that I work in really are in the collection of information and the reporting out of that information so that we have a common understanding of what those issues are. Certainly the more positive approaches to improving our health, and a lot of work in the background on the protection from health hazards and impediments. A little bit more on individual services. And I've often said to councils that one day I may be the one telling you that you must do something, such as in the drinking water area, and the next day I can be your best friend. So you may be mad at me one day and happy to have me around the other day. I can live with that. I just hope you can live with it as well. I try not to be on the negative or the forceful stick side, but occasionally that's necessary to for the protection of the very citizenry that both of us are charged with. So what is hot in the area of public health? And that's not specific to Port Alberni at this point in time. Certainly the overdose crisis is getting a lot of attention, as is the housing, and they put the crisis up there. It's not declared. I think all of us recognize that there are significant issues. Cannabis legislation has sort of crept in, and now we're beginning to understand what some of those repercussions are, and I think we're going to see more of that over the next 2 years. Alcohol consumption is the hidden substance issue, and one that is increasing to a point that it's actually becoming something that, as a community, not just Port Alberni, but many need to be looking at. What can we do to be stemming the increases? And there's some good news here in Port Alberni that I'm going to share with you. And the other one that we're seeing fairly significant changes in is the well-being of our children, certainly in relationship to our measurements when they start school, but also more about understanding the behavioral issues, the vulnerabilities, and some of the challenges that our children are now faced with. And that has been a significant change in a decade, and it's one that I really do think that all of us are perhaps overlooking. Other simmering issues that have been around for quite some time are the poverty and the wealth inequity distribution, which is a major driver of our health and well-being. Climate change, where Port Alberni is one of the communities that's engaged in the conversations with our ICLEI colleagues about doing some longer-term planning. It's one of those rising issues because we're beginning to see some of those consequences. Transportation, and as it relates to health, and it's not just getting to health services. And again, something that we've seen a fair bit in the Alberni Valley. Certainly other areas like healthy environments. Healthy aging is coming back in as a topic that had a lot of attention, perhaps not so much in the last decade, now coming back. And certainly the changes in family structures and supports for our children is one of those simmering issues. So what can I share with you? Life expectancy, we've known in the Alberni Valley, is a couple of years shorter than we see on the rest of the island. The good news is that it continues to improve, and we continue to see extension of that life expectancy here in the valley. For what it's worth, that's more amongst females than it is amongst males. So males were actually seeing a little bit of lagging behind the average, which is those thick blue lines between BC and the island, and often driven by external causes of death, motor vehicle crashes and other potentially external injuries. We're seeing some good news trends if we're actually looking at central part of Port Alberni in terms of early development instrument. And for those of you who aren't familiar with these numbers, we want to see these graphs going down, not sliding upwards. So certainly in the central area, in the most recent round of the EDI, we saw improvements with fewer kids with vulnerabilities. And I think that's actually a reflection of some of the intense work that's been done in that area. Unfortunately, we're starting to see some increases happening, particularly in the north end of Port Alberni. And the fact that we can get geographic specific within the community is something that I also wanted to share with you. I mentioned alcohol and drug use. These are hospitalization rates, both of which are on their way up. The good news is tobacco-associated hospitalization is continuing to drop. It's just dropping now below alcohol-related hospitalization. So alcohol has become more important than tobacco in terms of the use of our health services. Another way to look at this is this graph, and this is consumption per person per day as an adult. And here in the valley, which is the top green number, that's 14.4 liters of absolute alcohol per person or per adult per day for the entire year. That works out an average of 3 standard drinks per person per day. Now the average on the island's 2, so I just wanted to put that in context. And certainly when we look at alcohol specific outcomes, we see that trend amongst residents in the valley as well. So next question becomes, what can you do about that? And I'll give you one suggestion before I leave. In terms of the overdose crisis, hopefully not an unfamiliar graph. The red line is the Alberni Valley, includes the whole of the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District. Most of the events happen here in the valley specifically, and specifically in Port Alberni. The red line was parallel to what we see on the island in BC right through until 2017, when we saw a significant increase here in Port Alberni. The rates now are about 50% higher than we see on average for the province. The good news is that the rates between 2017 and 2018, that looks like it's coming down, but they're actually fairly comparable. And that's the same trend that we've seen across the province. We are starting to see some communities nearby where that actually is beginning to decrease. So hopefully we're going to see some more benefit and some more improvements. Certainly I know the Port Alberni community has come together incredibly well in terms of the response. And I know that the community action team was here a few weeks ago presenting to you. Press the wrong button again. I'll be presenting this evening on air quality in the community, and I wanted to share this is an ongoing issue. The red line is Port Alberni. What's not clear in this is that dotted red line is the standard that we're trying to achieve. For the last 2 years, we have seen Port Alberni amongst other communities actually having higher levels of, higher than accepted provincial levels of fine particulate matter. And that trend is something that we thought we were making progress on. Even if we take away the effects of wildfire smoke, there seems to be an increase that's happened over the last couple of years. So something, again, that Council will want to be watching in its upcoming term. So just concluding, overall health continues to improve. For some reason, we have a gender differential that's happening here in the valley with females gaining more than males. Most of our disease-specific indicators in the valley actually demonstrate there's room for improvement. That's fair. And most of that can be linked back to what we measure within the determinants of health. So actually addressing those determinants will have a longer-term benefit. As mentioned, disconcerting trends for children. And in particular, one that we know about here is very high rates of teen and under 20 parenting. The average for the province would be about 3%. Here in the valley, it's been running between 9 and 10% for many years and not coming down, whereas we've seen it come down in most other areas. Substance use is increasing. Alcohol remains the leading concern. And motor vehicle crashes are an area that of particular concern for most rural parts of the valley. From a healthcare utilization, I didn't get into that, but just to say that very comparable measures in terms of access to services, with perhaps not so comparable for residential care, but there is some solutions coming online. So what can I suggest that you look at in your upcoming term? Number one is going to be further the housing work. And I know the modular housing unit actually was looking at it to start bringing people over as soon as it gets its occupancy permit. And that could be today or tomorrow. It's a beautiful place, and I think everyone should be proud of it. In terms of the substance use side, there's still room for improvement on the stigma and empathy. However, I will say that I've actually used Port Alberni as an example of how things are getting done better than most communities. So real challenges there, just understanding. One of the things that I really encourage you to look at is a municipal alcohol action plan. This is not about eliminating the use of alcohol, but it is about trying to help stem and reduce that alcohol consumption component. Cannabis planning, I know there's some work underway. And then just a few others that we've addressed already. And with that, Your Worship, of course, there's some resources if you want to get at. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, please do so. And I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, questions? Very few questions today. Okay, well then, on behalf of council, I just want to thank you for coming. You know, you referenced using Port Alberni as an example for the work that's being done around reducing stigmas, and a lot of that work being done by the community action team. But I want to thank you as well, because you have been incredibly engaged in our community, speaking at a lot of events and opioid awareness nights and things like that. And I think you're a voice in the community that people have a lot of respect for. So it matters when you come out and speak at those events. So thanks for the work you're doing as well.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council, and maybe next year.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, no other questions? Thanks very much for being here. Okay, and our third delegation is Joan Miller from the North Island Film Commission. Welcome, Joan.
The button in the middle, we're ready to go. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Council, and administration staff. Thank you very much for inviting us over to do our hopefully short presentation to you. A little bit of information on our industry and the work we're doing throughout the whole sector in actually Central and North Island. The first covers just a few of the projects that we filmed last year that were filmed around the regions. This is what's Association of Film Commissioners International is a certification organization. I'm a certified film commissioner. My colleague, Daniel Price here, is also a certified with the industry. She takes care of locations and projects. A lot of my time now is really focused on initiatives that we have going. I do a lot of the fixing and I do a lot of the grant writing. So we've kind of got our specialties and our expertise in those areas. Our core services are we are the first stop when it comes to the film industry. We get the first call from production. They'll send us a script or they'll give us a description of a location that they're interested in. We return to them a digital package of images along with a lot of information about filming or working in our region. This can range anywhere from locations, costs, an assortment of locations that meet the criteria, tax incentives, crew base, everything that they are looking for to begin to decide whether they want to come here and take a quick look. So that's how we advance with it. We also do the marketing. We do the work with the province. I'm the president of the Regional Film Commissions Association, so there's a lot of networking that goes on. It's a large industry in the big scope of things, but a very small industry because there is a core group of people that you get to know on a national and international basis that really are the ones that build your network and are the ones that help attract and produce projects in our area. We run on a budget of, this has been hopefully our best year yet. $165,000 is our annual budget. That allows us to pay for 2 full-time staff and all the costs to do what we do to service the region. Our budget is probably $40,000 to $50,000 lower than our colleagues, full-time colleagues in the regions of BC. But to make that up, we've been really good at project grants. So for the last 19 years, we have worked with Island Coastal Economic Trust, WED, we've worked with Community Futures, we work with everybody that has a funding application out there that we can apply for to build the tools and to build the different initiatives that we wanted to have grow in our region in order to support the industry. Our locations is basically our initial tool. So we have about 40,000 digital images throughout our whole entire region, which is mostly Ladysmith north to all through the Mount Waddington region. It takes us right up onto the mainland to the Mount Waddington, where we run into the Carrible-Chilcotin. We have 252 unique locations in the Alberni-Clayoquot region, over 5,000 individual images, which we use to put together the initial packages. We have we continue to expand on the locations as the requests come in. So we know the certain things that we're going to get asked for, which come usually in threes. So we'll be beaches, 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 forests, forests, forests. You know, they usually come, it's just happens to seem to be a pattern over the 20 years. They don't come one at a time, they come in a cluster. And it seems to me like all the writers in Hollywood are all sitting in the same room and deciding what the content of their project's going to be about, and then they all blast it out. So they're competing with each other constantly. We don't necessarily look at postcard images. So it's where, yes, we can open up with something that's more of a beautiful picture. They really are looking for digging down deep into the content of their project, which might not necessarily have anything to do with what we think is a beautiful attraction. They may be looking for alleys and back roads, things that when you think about television series and movies, it's not always a visual walk in the park. So it's very surprising that, you know, the types of locations that we're looking for, and they may not be what the average television person would think we'd be out looking for at all. Like we have a beautiful park, park, but that might not necessarily be anything that the film industry is looking for. This is a picture of at Anglers Trail and some of the old growth out at Anglers Trail on the Stamp River, which is an amazing location, but it also competes with the Cathedral Grove, Elk Falls Park. The decisions to come to an old growth forest lots of times are based on many other factors, and it's just really a beautiful location. This is the way we deliver one of our location files. So this is actually the Catalyst Mill. This is one of our favorite files, which is what my example of what our industry really loves may not be what you think is a really great location, but this one is the old part of the mill. And the manager of the mill and the previous managers have been really, really fabulous to us every time we're looking for something like this. So this is an area that looks like it can play, they call it Beirut down at the mill, and it can have that look and feel. We're sending it out to TV series like Six and different ones that are SEAL teams, and they're looking for those locations within British Columbia, but that can play a foreign land that really looks very diverse. And so, I mean, surprisingly or not, that is one of our most amazing locations that we do send out a lot to all these TV series. So part of what I do is the professional development and the training. So the reality is, in order for us to attract production outside of the Lower Mainland, where all the crews go home at night, where all the services are, we had to start beginning to putting some things together that will allow to offset those extra costs that they talk to us about. So we began bringing in some of the workshops that you have to work on a set, so that we were trying to drive more opportunities for local employment. So motion picture industry orientation is one. It's you have to have it to work on a set. We bring it in quite often. So we bring in the Director's Guild location scouting and try to put locals through so that we can utilize them to do some of our scouting for us. Right now we're 3/4 of the way through a program with Women in Film and Television with Indigenous women it's called Tricksters and Writers. We have participants from the Valley here that are working on it, so we're working with them to encourage them how to gain the skills to be able to write the scripts so that they will end up being able to tell their own stories. We've been bringing in producers workshops. We've been working on the biggest project we've had for the last 3 years is a partnership with North Island College. So we went out and we leveraged and lobbied, and finally were able to be successful to get some funding to start developing some real craft style training. So we looked at construction, electrical, lighting, and we developed courses with North Island College through a pilot program. We put 137 people through them last year, and we are now in the phase of reviewing and recommendations, but we've had some amazing successes with these people going out and getting work. So these are some of the types of programs that I spend my time working on to build us. This is a bit of a write-up by the provincial government on our crew training, and you probably know that we based it out one session out of Campbell River, one session out of Port Alberni, so that we could hit the central East Coast and then the West Coast. So the government has been now profiling it as being one of their successful pilot programs, and we're hoping we're going to be able to continue to work with them and North Island College to grow the training programs. Screen-induced tourism is something that we've championed for a long time. What's the other opportunity for you to bring the economics back in after the production leaves? So we started out with A&E's History Channel alone and ourselves doing alone the campaign. We were having a bit of a problem trying to sell it, the idea of working with the tourism. So I was basically wearing both the tourism and the film hat. Alone did 3 years of a campaign that was really successful. From that, we moved into a partnership with Tourism Vancouver and did a War for the Planet of the Apes. So we did we went a trip to Vancouver Island. So we worked with the West Coast, where we filmed over in Ucluelet and Tofino and put a package together. Tourism Vancouver were just shocked by the amount of hits they got on it. So we have now moved forward to partner with them and Tourism Vancouver Island. So we right now have one for Chesapeake Shores that's ongoing, and we have 4 coming out for 2019 with the release of Sonic the Hedgehog, the new Disney movie, and we're working on one with Apple's new TV series, C. And more recently talking to the producers of Come to Daddy that filmed over in Tofino last summer, and they're really interested in working with us as well. So what we do is profile our region. We understand the needs of the industry, basically confidentiality, a lot of things going on on that we don't talk to anyone about. Confidentiality is a big part of what we do as the Film Commission. We know where things are going, we know what things are happening, but we can't discuss it. We sign NDAs. It's really important to our industry that no information is released outside of their purview. Everything that does get released gets released through permission through the production company. So where a lot of people would love to know what things are going on, unfortunately, I'm the last person that can talk about it. So we provide all the relevant information. We are available to them 24/7, so my phone is on Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, and believe me, they're not afraid to call. So if you're not available to them all the time to fix things, and if you're really good at what we do, no one ever knows there was a problem and no one ever knows it was fixed. So that's something I spend a lot of time doing, is fixing and repairing things that come up. And my network locally throughout the region and the people that respond to us, like the Pat Deacons, I will say I'm going to have to shout out to Pat Deacon. I've always said he's the best economic development officer that I've worked with in my entire history of my career for 20 some odd years. He responds.
Shout out.
He responds instantly. Pat's a roll up the seas kind of guy. We come over, he does and responds. He's awesome. You're really lucky to have him. So the things that we don't do, we don't influence where productions go based on what kind of funding we get from any of our region. We're not for-profit association. We can't charge for our services, but the film industry does not go where we ask them to go, unfortunately. They go where they need to go based on whatever the creative is, whatever the cost is. There's a lot of reasons why they make their decision, but we are not influenced, or we do not influence them basically because we sleep in a community or we're funded more by one community or the other. So the decision is based, yes, on the creative and the bottom line, access to local crew, services, and equipment. This is what we've been trying to work on. Accommodation is really, really important. If they can't, depending on the crew, if they're coming from a big studio, the big studio, first thing they say to me is you have 4-star hotels. And if you don't, they sometimes write that into their union agreements, that this is the level of accommodation they have to provide for their crew. Smaller productions, independent productions, are a little bit lighter to move around, but you also need to have availability to put in 200 or 300 rooms at a time at a very short notice. The film industry is notorious for taking forever to make a decision. Then they make a decision and want to do it tomorrow. So we're constantly fighting with the fact that they want to put in such a large group of people, and they usually want to keep it contained within 1 or 2 or 3 places because they have to move them around. So that's always a challenge. An airport is always something we get asked for with regular scheduled flights for Vancouver Island because they've got to move day crew in and out daily. So they like to have regular scheduled flights they can work with. Also, the qualified tax incentives of the basic and the region of the district make a big difference on their decision. Here's a little something we thought we would end ours with, which I didn't know was going to do this, set up the next speaker, and really we didn't work together. But here's a project that's just been released that's shot here. I don't know if they've got sound. So you can recognize one of your biggest assets for us over here is the McLean's Mill and your Alberni train system. So sorry guys that the volume's not coming out really well. But the trains and the McLean Mill have been something that we are constantly scouting with. Access to that kind of a facility with a historical look and feel, and also access to trains that have the support system, whether they can be the steam engine, which yes, I support the repair of the steam engine, I'll put that on record, and the crew of people here, they've been awesome, their volunteer work. So those assets are things that will bring them back to Port Alberni because it's something you can't access somewhere else. So if you did have the music, this is all about hunting for Sasquatches on Vancouver Island, but a big chunk, and they brought their, and confidentiality is another big part of it. These trucks, we were filming this in 2018. This is a 2019 commercial. Nobody's allowed to see those trucks. So you're hiding trucks. You're hiding trucks because the company does not want to have its trucks being seen by, their next year's rollout before they get to roll it out. So this was something that we worked with with your group around, with a lot of assets around this area of locations. It took quite a while for them to figure it all out, but this is one of their new commercials that's launching in the US right now. It kind of misses without the sound. But it's actually based on Sasquatch sightings in the region. So Toyota went and looked at where the Sasquatch sightings were and then created their commercial around it and talked about their new trucks rolling out were going to be Sasquatch hunting. But it was great because we played Vancouver Island. We never play Vancouver Island. We're always cheating somewhere else. It gave us all this extra promotion through the big Toyota commercial in the States that they were profiling Vancouver Island. So that's kind of my quick update.
I remember leaving that one footprint when I was over
There you go. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for coming, Councillor Solda.
Hi.
Hi, Cindy.
I was on the commission a
Yes,
while
you
back,
were.
so, and I am,
I see that
have been
too.
appointed again. So I have a couple of questions. First of all, regarding the airport, do you find that Port Alberni or the region is losing potential filming because we don't have a major airport?
I wouldn't say that you've lost anything until you've gained it.
Right.
That is a key tool. We're constantly asked, depending on the size and scope of the production. So say something like a Chesapeake Shores that's filming on the other side of you right now. One of their things was to be able to fly their day crew, their day talent in. So having the airport attached to the Vancouver South Terminal, that they could fly those. When they're looking at money, it costs to bring someone over. If they can bring them over in the morning flight and they can send them home, they're not putting them up overnight, and they're moving them in and out. It always comes down to the bottom line. So yes, we always get asked, are there regular scheduled flights that we can bring specific pieces of equipment over or send stuff? It makes a big difference in part of their decision, but there's not one particular thing that throws it all out of whack. They put it all out there and they make a decision based on a lot of factors. But the airport, we know we fly in a lot of them. They'll bring people into Tofino. They were really happy when, there was an expanded Pacific Coastal flights went in there. So yes, it does make a difference based on the size. The smaller productions like the commercials or the independents, they're more likely to be a little more self-contained and not need it. But yes,
The good thing is we are working on our airport, and I do sit on the airport committee on behalf of the regional district. So
we're thrilled with that. Any of those pieces coming together really helps us get out there and promote it.
Okay, and the other thing is, you've heard through the paper and everything about the data that's on the your website, on the commission's website, and some of this stuff in the region is outdated, like they don't match. When I take a look at it, it's saying the key is somewhere else and different things.
Yeah, there was a couple things were pointed out, and that's great. We have 25,000 square miles of region that we feel very comfortable, we're really well acquainted with, and there's always updates, so we're always making updates. Tanya runs the locations library. The one that we keep online is a bit of a version, but it's not the internal version that we work with. The internal one is stored at Creative BC, and it's confidential. Nobody can pull or put files in there other than us. So we do try to keep updating it as best we can. But it's, when you have 40,000 images, before we go back, when we look at it, this is the way it works. So if we were to look at, whether it's Alberni Key or Victoria Key, if they like the images, they aren't looking at the name of it. They're looking at the image we send. Then they would say, we're really interested in that. So we would go back and we'd reconnect. Before we'd ever have them come over to the next step, which is a location survey, we go back and look at every single shot that they've looked at. So the worst thing you can possibly do is arrive and find out that a forest that you sent them images is now not a forest anymore. It's gone. And that kind of thing happens when you have different industries working together, or a train that you've been sending to everybody to say, hey, you can come and film. We have a train is not running. That doesn't bode well for anybody if we're not up. So you can only use them as a tool, but then you make sure as you advance through the process, and there are many different processes when you're working on a production, that you're back checking your facts constantly. So we do have people coming in. This summer we had quite a lot of scouting went on, And so the location scouts were very professional scouts working on big shows. They came in, they reshot a bunch of information, and then they shared it with us. And Tanya loaded it all to the main frame at the Creative BC, and that's updated, and it will automatically knock the old stuff out. So it is a constant battle everywhere to keep your information fresh.
So what's on the Creative BC is a little more updated than the one that
the stuff that we have on ours is information that we would have loaded. But I mean, when we were loading the pictures for Port Alberni, I'm going to be real honest. We don't have a lot of funds to do that. We wrote a grant with a partnership through Community Futures. I wrote a grant through Ellen Co. So I think we hired one of your family to shoot pictures for us. We tried to hire local. But then if there's no funding and there's nothing out there for you to continue to progress, then you're working with what you have. And so every time we come over, we reshoot, or when we ask somebody, what's the update, we'll send somebody back if they're over this way to make sure that they reshoot. So yes, it is a key. It's a key tool, but it's the one that kind of gets their attention. Productions know very well when you're sending them location files that they want another one shot before they're serious. So if they're serious, a new location with updated information will be shot and sent, because they're not going to come here based on something that was shot 5 years ago.
And I know it's always been a struggle with the Film Commission from the past, especially when you were the only one, and then you had your partner in crime in there, and it's been a struggle. So the ACRD has upped what they gave you from last year, just so you know that.
I heard that, and so we did go look and didn't see it, but we're going to come back and do a presentation to up with them, and we really appreciate that. But we feel like, I'm going to be real honest. We tripled the numbers in British Columbia. Our region did 3 times more than any other region in BC last year, and I think, but a lot of it was based on a lot of different things. Our training programs, the fact that we are trying to get people with trades into our industry, so that we're trying to offset all those other areas, plus encourage higher local. We've done really well. Could we do better? In a perfect world, if I won the lottery, yes, we could. But I feel very proud of what the group's done and all of the type of support that we've had. We've had a lot of support from, Community Futures, from all the people in your community have been very supportive all the way along. And we see more than anyone else sees all the opportunities when we send information to. It just takes that right decision and the right player to say that's exactly what we're looking for. But we don't try to oversell. We don't tell every community, this is going to come to you. You're going to be the next great location. But you have all these great advantages. You have people like Colson's. We were working with Colson's to look at using one of the Mars bombers in A-Team. The thing was, it was broken, and they couldn't use it. So A-Team, once we looked at it, they were like, we love this, and they fixed it. So they went and repaired one of the Mars bombers, to make us have a scene in a movie, but it allowed that Mars bomber to get back on the schedule again. Colson's been just really smart when it comes to, we've been doing work with them, profiling through documentaries, and the next thing you know, we have Colson Entertainment. So individual business people are taking hold of the opportunities and are developing things. So Colson's have Colson Entertainment, and they're working on projects all the way around, and they really took what they had. They could feature all of their aircraft, and they're using them in a lot of commercials and movies. So entrepreneurs around the island are now starting to do that. The new Vancouver Island Studios was a warehouse. He was a warehouse operator who would build warehouses for storage. There was a production there. They were using the warehouse. So this person, the entrepreneur, took it upon himself to build purpose-built stages. And so it's where we encourage. Part of it isn't I can't build a stage and I can't build a service production, but we definitely can support and encourage people who see an opportunity and want to advance with it.
So, Madam Mayor, I'll hold the rest of my questions for the ACRD presentation, okay? And just let me know when the next meeting is.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Councillor Poon?
Yes, I was wondering, when you find these locations, do you determine or do you give any input as to how much they're worth and
no, that's a fine
rental costs?
No, everything is a fine line. It's not our role to tell, to get involved in the middle of the financial deals. That's one industry talking to a private industry, a private owner. But we have been known from time to time to to provide them with some examples of other areas and other costs related to what has been paid out before. But I will tell you, we keep an eye on the costs, and I can't think of, I really can't think of any example over the last 20 years where the industry has gone in and really tried to take a big advantage. Location managers want to keep their job, they want to keep their next job. And so they want to walk, their job's the same as ours, walk a fine line between making sure the production's getting good value, but also that the location is getting a good value. So they know the negotiated rates, and if if someone asks for too much, they go somewhere else. It's business. They'll look for a location that's...
Are you aware of any productions which haven't paid anything for their locations?
We have people volunteer their locations all the time. We have people phone and say, we'd love to have a production use our facility, and we're happy to have them do it for no fee, because we want to help support building and attracting the industry, because it fills hotels and restaurants and it provides jobs. So yes, we do get people that are not so much interested in the bottom line of making money off the industry, but want to see that industry come to their community. A lot of times, majority of our communities that we work with, if it's a city-owned property, to be competitive, because we want them to leave Vancouver and to come, we'll quite often say, if we own this piece of parking lot, you can use it. We just want to make sure that we always make sure they have the proper liability insurance, security, and that we never want to see a city employee ever to have to be used where the production is not covering the cost of that city employer's time. But many of our communities will waive the costs on some of their own facilities in order to attract the production there, so that they can spend the money that they spend in other areas.
One more question. So for our area, in order to attract more film productions, would you suggest maybe we would need more accommodations, or is there more services that we need to provide?
Accommodations has been a challenge here. We've had 2 or 3 feature films that have taken a really serious dive into this community. We found the locations working with Pat. I have to say, he's like, I remember saying to him, okay, I need this. So he took me to see some of the trestles that I hadn't seen, and we thought a lot of areas here. I need a steeple. He goes, oh my God, you can't believe it. We have a steeple in storage at one of our facilities that came off of another church. And so he was able to provide me with all. So it came down to, when they were budgeting it, they couldn't find enough accommodation, because you guys have done a really great job of promoting yourself as a tournament capital. We couldn't find enough accommodation that we didn't have to move 3 people 2 days to somewhere else. And it ended up, we've had 3 or 4 incidences where not being able to get the kind of accommodation we needed has made the final decision, because they had to go somewhere where they could put up the crew.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
I think in part you answered some of my question on the accommodation side. Like, when Insomnia was filmed here, actually, they set up a small city on the Port Authority property with luxury trailers, and I'm not sure where Robin Williams and Al Pacino stayed, but I would suspect they probably stayed in their trailer. So is that that philosophy of them setting up their own little city enclave?
You might have saw what's called the star trailers, and they travel with the production, but those people go to a hotel at night. They don't sleep in those trailers. That's where they are sitting, waiting to be called in and out of set. Insomnia was really interesting, because we were working on Insomnia at the same time we were working on Final Destination, or not Final Destination, on Trap, the first time we ever used the main highway. So we had 2 crews going with 2 productions at the same time. Was awesome, but they picked this particular thing to play an area that was so right for the script. And so this is where it comes into, the power of the director or the producer. If a director has a lot of power when it comes to influence, when it comes to the script that they are directing, they can sometimes override the line producer who controls the budget, right? So we have had certain directors who will say, we want to go there and do that. And the line producer's just in the back of my car freaking out when he's trying to figure out the numbers and what logistics. But if the director had that much power to go to something that he saw the look and feel of that worked for his content, he's going to drive it if the studio provides them with the money to get there. So at the time, they wanted that particular look. And he was determined. And so they can, I'm not saying that there's anything that can't be done in our industry. I'm kind of just giving you the reasons why we get so far in certain places, and then we always know what we're going to run up against, how much local crew goes home at night that's qualified, trained, and unionized crew. What is the level of your accommodations? Do the flights come in? Those are all right up front questions that we get asked.
If there's a will, there's a way, right, Bill?
There is.
We'll figure it out. If they're coming, we'll
Yeah,
fix
yeah.
them up.
No, you guys, they have been great, but the will is, we've tried 3 or 4 times, and we've had different organizations do a really great job trying to pull it up, but they can't move people out of reservations for a tournament and say no. And it's really difficult to go back and say, well, you can have 45 rooms in this place for 3 days, but on Friday, that's completely booked out. And they just start looking at the logistics of it and going, well, we can't do this. It's too much. So,
Sure.
yeah, we will. We'll continue because we believe strongly that the Valley is beautiful. I can't talk about all the productions that we bring through here, but there's a lot of people traveling through here looking all the time. And we know the right project will land.
Okay. Dan, any questions? No? Councillor Paul?
So accommodations is really the only thing holding us back then?
Well, you have to have the right script for the location as well. And they will say, which is why we're working really hard to do local crew. What is your crew base? So our crew base is growing for the region, but we don't represent one city. We represent a whole area. So when we do training, we may have 5 from one community, 5 from another community. Those people have to be willing to move with the productions as well. If they think they're just going to stay home in their one community and get full-time work, that's not going to happen. You have to be as movable as our industry is.
Okay. Well, thank you very
No,
much
thank
for
you.
coming.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming and at least providing this context. It's helpful for us to hear some of the feedback and hear more about the opportunities as well, because I think we're all excited about some of the things going on the island.
Well, and I think,
you guys are doing
that's a
great
hard
job.
one to follow up because it has clustered. One came to talk a TV series into staying. There was a lot we committed to get that training going, but they were looking for a certain look. To Chesapeake Shores was looking for East Coast. They didn't even want a fir tree. And I'm like, I can't do anything about all those fir trees. I'm sorry, right? But they found enough in some of the smaller communities that had a look and feel that they could cheat. And there have been projects that have been really close to here, and then the directors loved it, the producers loved it, and then the financing falls apart way down in LA. Things that we have no control over. So it's not like, that they haven't been looking and there isn't an opportunity to you guys have got great, there's great parts of the community that are reflective of period homes that are so great. The width of Argyle Street, you don't find that in Cumberland. Cumberland's another walk-in set, and we've worked so hard and gotten so close with them, but it will happen. But we keep building from behind the scenes. We keep providing the training. We keep trying to do the work. And some of the people that are right now very excited and are coming to you are people that have taken our workshops. So they've taken a 2-day workshop here, and they're working as a background extra, and they've taken whatever. And we love the fact that the community's excited and sees the potential, but we have to be very realistic that, yes, the industry is growing, but we have to continue to build from behind the scenes. We got to keep building it all up so that we can be sustainable and not just be a one-off for one particular reason.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do have one more delegation today. I think we're going to maybe try to call Councillor Haggard back because we did lose her. And then we'll get on to our last delegation. Someone hung up on her. Okay. We'll see if we get her. get one try.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi.
Concerned it was happy hour.
That's right. Okay. Okay, thank you. So our fourth delegation, Darian, I'm sorry, I can't say your last name. Edgeler, come on up. And Sydney.
Good afternoon. For those of you who know me, I'm Darian Edgeler. For those of you who don't know me, I remain Darian Edgeler. Of 4301 Gertrude Street. I'd like to start by offering immense amounts of appreciation to Mayor Minions in this council. I'm grateful for the opportunity to address you today. I will be referring to prepared remarks during my presentation so as not to lose my train of thought. That's a gentle joke that I'm including right off the top to show that I come in peace. Accompanying me today is the light of my life, my fiancée, Sydney Peterson. I help Sydney run 5 different companies here in town: Slammer's Gym, the Italian Hall Event Center, DBA Silencing, Handy Andy Rentals, and TKS Hydraulics. These organizations are owned by Sydney's grandparents, Archie and Shirley Cardinal, who are also in attendance today. Speaking of Archie and Shirley, I should make a correction for the record. In the letter I sent you last week, I suggested that Archie and Shirley have been operating businesses and providing employment opportunities in the Alberni Valley for over 40 years. That statement is inaccurate. Shirley tells me that she and Archie have in fact been operating businesses and providing employment opportunities for over 50 years. My apologies, Shirley, for the error. Speaking of my letter, I assume you've all had a chance to review it. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the situation, I will provide an extremely brief recap. At the beginning of last July, Sydney and I met with the folks at McLean Mill to discuss the possibility of having our wedding there. We were told that for $6,000 plus $300 GST, we could have the entire park for the weekend of May 25th this year, and that we could transport our guests to and from our ceremony and reception in an antique locomotive that our contract describes as the number 7 Steam. Needless to say, we were pretty darn excited about using the vintage train. We dubbed it the Alter Express. We were told that the cars can accommodate 200 people, so we carefully scrutinized our plus ones to make sure we wouldn't exceed the limit. I custom ordered an old-fashioned wedding suit, a frock coat that wouldn't look out of place alongside a steam-powered engine. We arranged for a local cellist to welcome our guests with music after they disembarked at the platform. We also organized archways by the platform. And we made plans to thrill our guests by having the train stopped mid-route by what would at first appear to be a menacing band of brigands, but which would eventually turn out to be a group of scruffy well-wishers who just wanted to give us a wedding present. And we started to research ways to accommodate our guests with specific needs. I have a friend who had a stroke recently, and he now has difficulty walking. He was determined to ride the train, however, and he asked me to figure out a way to make it happen. I guess he reckons this may be his last chance to take a journey on a retro locomotive. What I'm trying to get at is that we planned our wedding around the train. The train was at the center of it all. So you can imagine how heartbroken we were to hear that the foundation upon which we had built the most important day of our lives was being yanked out from under us without warning. And our dreams are not the only ones that have been derailed. There are a number of other couples who have also been left in the lurch. There's Miranda Dieterle and Brad Henley, who live out of town, but who asked me to speak today on their behalf. Rumor has it that Cody Ether and Nicole Flynn are impacted by this. We also have Talon Whittall and Sherelle Dawson, who's in the house and who run the Blue Marlin Inn / the Arlington Hotel. There's Cody Moreau and Tatiana Simpson as well. Tatiana operates the Power of 3, and she's busy with clients today, but she too authorized me to act as her proxy. As it happens, the various brides and grooms who are affected by changes to the train service run businesses that employ more than 85 people in this community, and we have collectively well over 600 wedding guests who are looking forward to riding the antique locomotive featured in our invitations. And all of us, it turns out, settled on McLean Mill because of the train. Miranda and Brad were leaning towards Tainamara, or a venue in Tofino, before they succumbed to the siren song of the train. Sydney and I, meanwhile, were talking seriously about Miller Gardens in Qualicum Beach, or Cedar Haven in East Souk, before the promise of a train allowed McLean Mill representatives to successfully woo us. And the train, it bears repeating, was the key. I mean, we could have our wedding at the Italian Hall Event Center for free. And that would be better in a lot of ways. It's a far more central location, for one thing, and the facility isn't undersized. The structure at McLean Mill can't hold all our guests, so our reception will be an awkward half-in, half-out affair. The guests in the courtyard will be cold, and there will be mosquitoes biting them. The washrooms, meanwhile, are a bit dodgy, and there's no place for Sydney to get ready. She'll be preparing to walk down the aisle on her wedding day in a dirty cabin without power. And again, the reason we were willing to pony up 6 large and overlook this laundry list of deficiencies is the train. So having heard all that, you'll understand why we'd like you to hold up your end of the bargain, why we'd like you to run a limited train service in 2019. Now, doing so would no doubt involve some challenges, but you're clearly an intelligent and resourceful group of people, and we have absolute confidence in your ability to overcome these sorts of obstacles should you decide it's the right thing to do. And it is the right thing to do for 2 reasons. First reason, you're good people. You don't want to Welsh on our deal. I'm sure that's not why you got into public service, to wreck people's weddings. And I know that you don't want to be the Trump administration constantly entangled in lawsuits. We have consulted an attorney, and it's her legal opinion that the equipment clause of our contracts is meant to address scenarios such as 11th hour breakdowns. And this is not that. You don't want to be sitting in depositions where we attempt to determine who learned what when about the track maintenance situation and whether that should have been disclosed earlier. Neither do we. We don't want to have to file suit. We don't want to start granting the media requests we've received and have to publicly describe shabby and unjust treatment in our hometown. We don't want to have to launch a Save the Train campaign and get thousands of online signatures on a petition. We want to be spending our time composing vows that are lyrical and exquisite. We want to be figuring out how we're going to keep that one eccentric uncle from getting hammered and delivering an inappropriately sexual toast after the cutting of the cake. So please, let's sort this out and move forward together today. Second reason, you may think that I'm only here for selfish reasons, and that I'm here for Sydney. And I'll cop to that. I would happily slay 1,000 dragons to keep my bride from being disappointed. But I'm also 100% convinced that running the train, even in a limited way, will benefit Port Alberni. We need tourism. If the temporary closure of the Western Forest Products Mill demonstrates anything, it's that a diversified economy is critical to our survival. The Alberni Valley needs to attract tourist dollars, and there are simply a lot of other places that have hiking and fishing and shopping and so on. What those other places don't have is a working passenger locomotive. The train is our competitive advantage. The train is our secret weapon. And you don't let your secret weapon rust into oblivion. You deploy it strategically. You have to have it ready to go so that when a film company shooting in BC is scouting sites for a train scene, they end up coming here. Now, investing money in the train isn't going to be met with approval by everyone in this community, but the multiplier effect means that you will reap many times what you sow. And effective leaders can't worry about making universally popular choices. Effective leaders have to make smart choices. And as you said, Mayor Minions, in the city's graffiti removal program promo video, we don't want to be seen as a town that's given up. Abandoning the train sends the message that we've given up. I'd like to close by talking about the cruise ships. Before we signed our contract with McLean Mill, we asked about the condition of the 3 trains. We were told that if the steam train broke down, then one of the other 2 locomotives would be pressed into service. We were told that this was guaranteed because the city would need to have a train running for the 3 big boats this summer. It's since come to our attention that the date of our nuptials is the same Saturday that one of the cruise ships will be in port. And it was suggested by someone that this was a problem. This is not a problem. We're reasonable people. We want what's best for this town. So go ahead and make arrangements with the tour directors to add some expeditions to the schedule. The ship passengers are welcome on site during our wedding weekend. In fact, they might enjoy some of the things that we have lined up for our guests. We have live music, as mentioned. We have a henna artist. We have a tarot reader. We have someone doing caricatures. We have a local business called Smoothology, handing out free bags of freshly popped corn. Tell you what, you get one of the trains running and bring out those cruise ship passengers after lunch, and we'll see if we can't get our entertainers to be there in the afternoon as well as the evening. We'll show them a good time. Our treat. All right, this presentation has reached the final station. I'd like to conclude by formally proposing that you honor our agreements by running trains for the brides and grooms that paid for and were promised locomotives. While I won't officially propose it, I will suggest strongly that you also protect this community's cultural vitality by running trains for events such as the Locomotive Wine and Cheese that will generate sufficient revenue to cover costs. And I'd like to urge you, as both a citizen and a business person, to run trains on select dates, such as cruise ship Saturdays, when it's important to Port Alberni's long-term tourism prospects that we pull out all the stops. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Darian. Council questions. Councillor Corbeil.
Mr. Edgeler, what would the component of the train have cost your wedding party? Was it broken down?
We paid for the trestle package, which was $6,000 all in. So there was no kind of, specific breakdown on what cost what.
So you have no idea how much of that $6,000 went to the running of the train?
Nope.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Solda.
So at the mill, how many hours were you, or days? Is it a whole weekend, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that you rented the mill for?
Yes, we did buy out the site for the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So we have 1 day for setup, 1 day for the event, and 1 day for cleanup. But again, we're not concerned about site exclusivity. We're happy to welcome the cruise ship passengers those days.
No, I'm just kind of curious to
Yeah.
know what you got for the $6,000.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
No comments? Okay. So I just want to say, and I think we should kind of add to the discussion additional here. We've had a comment about the number 7 earlier today. We also have 2 letters additional to this on our agenda for this topic. We also have, if we need them, our budget for the train, if there's any questions on that. I just want to say on behalf of council that we feel for your situation very much. And we understand that we are the ones who made the decision. Nobody wants to ruin your wedding day, or cause challenges to your wedding day or any of the weddings. I think we all feel incredibly bad for the situation that we are in. That said, we did have to make some very difficult budget decisions this year. And I know that people don't see that $192,000 to run the train this year. And I know people think it can always be done for less. And it can be done for less, but we've done it for less in the past. But the reason it really can't be is that we've deferred maintenance on the tracks. We've deferred maintenance on the trains. That's why we're in the situation that we're in today, because for years we have tried to underfund something that really required a lot more funding. And now we have that buildup of maintenance that needs to be done. We have a 10-year track maintenance plan that I think was from 2017, but the work wasn't done. We didn't meet that 10-year commitment in 2017 or 2018. So we get further and further behind on this maintenance every year. So this year was a very difficult budget decision. And then added to that, we have $263,000 for the dam that needs to be repaired, that we're being told needs to be repaired. We have soil testing that we need to do that will likely lead to more funding. We are in a very difficult budget situation this year with McLean Mill as a whole. So we do not want to displace or, hamper your wedding plans in any way. But it is the challenging situation that we are in this year, and the train is not the kind of thing that can just be run a couple times, because it's more expensive to do that, because then we're not getting the revenue. So I'm not sure really if I have anything specific to add to that. Let me think. On the topic of the number 7, I would think that council would be very happy to support any kind of grant application that was going forward. We all want to see the number 7 run again. I think Councillor Poon has been quoted saying steam or nothing a number of times. We recognize the value that it brings to tourism in this community, and we recognize the value that it brings to the quality of life of the people who live in this community. So we want to see it run. We don't have a budget for it to run for this year. I'm not sure if there's specific grant applications going forward that, like if council could give, or if we would just need to be asked for a letter of approval. But I'm sure if IHS is applying for specific funding sources, that let us know the details, and I'm sure we would be happy to support those applications. Additional to that, what would need to happen would be somebody to make a motion to add $192,000 to our budget for the train in order to make it run this year, or try to make it run in this year.
Mayor Manions, I've heard that we could get the tracks up to speed and a train on there for less than 192. Is that not the case?
No. So we do have our budget if we want to put it up. So it's kind of a whole package, right? There's $150,000 of track maintenance. I think it's $40,000 to get the Alco. Maybe it was 20 or 40,000 to get the Alco up and running. Steam train, of course, is not an option for this year. Alco, we think, could be fixed and running in time, but it requires money to get up and running as well. Then, of course, we have to pay Alberni Pacific Railway manager because of the compliance that goes with it. So that's a part-time position as well. And there's, they'll pull up the budget just so that we can see it. But the city subsidy after, I think, $90,000 of revenue coming back is still $192,000.
Well, my understanding was that this is something that I received from a representative of McLean Mill. They said the tracks could be repaired for $90,000.
So it's that side to go all the way to the mill. So there's kind of two separate sections here. The first side is a proposal only to go to Roger Creek. So that one wouldn't be applicable to you. This is the proposal, 45 runs to McLean Mill, which would generate $123,000 of revenue. If there's fundraising, if there's a subsidy of $192,000 to the city, the total budget to run is $346,000 for the year. And then this is a breakdown of what the costs are to get it there. So of course the $125,000 to do the track maintenance, $40,000 for the locomotive repair, fuel, and everything is kind of broken down there, and those balance out in the end. So the $192,000, and I know people think we can do it for less, but the $192,000 is the shortfall that the city needs to run the train. So the actual operating budget that's the subsidy. The actual operating budget is $346,000. And this is publicly available. We can send it, to you so that you can have more time to look at it, but it is just a very challenging situation this year, and it unfortunately falls on the year of your wedding.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've changed course once. If the plan was originally to run the train this year and you changed course, I believe that you can change course again. This is ultimately your decision. If the political will is here, you could do it. So I don't really accept that excuse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further questions from council? Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for coming today. And we're sorry we don't have better news. Okay, we have no unfinished business, so moving on to staff reports. Item number 1, accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the certification of the Director of Finance dated March 11, 2019 be received, and checks numbered 143-267 to 143-382 inclusive, including of payments totaling $2,499,297.60 be approved.
Seconder? Second, Madam Mayor. All in favor? Carried. Councillor Haggard? We don't know if she's there. Thank you. You're in favor of accounts? Okay, moving on to item 2 from the Director of Finance, our Audit Committee. Council, we have the Audit Committee minutes and report in front of us. Are there any questions? Okay, Councillor Solda, would you like to make that motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move that the minutes from the February 25th, 2019 Audit Committee, the responses to the questions arising from the meeting dated March 4th, 2019, the quarterly analysis of the Mayor and Council travel and convention expenses ending December 31st, 2018, the financial statements ending December 31st, 2018, and the vendor check register report ending February 21st, 2019 be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? Seeing none. All in favor? Councillor Haggard?
Favor the motion.
Thank you. Okay, item 3, from the Manager of Planning and Communications Manager, the future of the Harborview lands, consultation program results.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. I think they're just pulling up a presentation that I have here. So before you is a report for information with regards to the public consultation program for the future of the Harborview lands. I've got a presentation here that provides kind of a high-level summary of what's in the report, a bit of background information, an overview of the findings, and some conclusions. So I'll just get straight into it. So as previously discussed at the February 19th Committee of the Whole meeting, the Harborview lands is 2 parcels of property owned by the city that present us with a unique opportunity to think about how we want to revitalize and redefine the downtown area. Previous attempts to develop these lands have met some community opposition or a lack of interest from the development community. This map here again just kind of shows where those lands are. Southport Alberni along the waterfront. You can see here again really their proximity to the Harbor Quay Marina, the Uptown Business District, and the downtown area overall. Currently those lands are zoned C7 for core business. They're designated as general commercial in the official community plan, and they fall within a development permit area number 2, which is commercial. So staff ran a consultation program from February 14th to March 5th of this year called The Future of the Harborview Lands. And the purpose of this consultation program was really to have an authentic and open discussion with the community about if there's interest in developing these lands, what type of development would be suitable, are there other things that we want to consider there. So this consultation program involved both online and in-person engagement, which included the Let's Connect PA platform, which involved a 9-question survey, and the Ideas and Comments platform, which is an open-ended forum for feedback. We analyzed Facebook comments that we received. We also used social media to promote the Let's Connect PA platform. We used the February 19th Committee of the Whole to gather some information from the public in person. We also did some face-to-face consultation. The manager of communications went around, talked to residents and businesses adjacent to the property to have a bit of discussion with them. And then we also provided a letter to high-impact stakeholders, again, those who are really close and adjacent to the property. So we had about 362 people visit the Let's Connect PA platform, which is great. We saw 67 people actually complete the survey, and 11 contributed their ideas to the platform. In terms of demographics, we see a pretty good fairly even representation of age groupings, but we did see that the 55 to 64-year-old age category was most represented, and the youngest, the 18 to 24-year-old age category being the least represented. Fairly common. We see slightly more female respondents than the male respondents, and with regards to the distribution of where survey respondents were coming from, we see about 50% or 49% identified as residing in Southport Alberni, 23% in Northport Alberni, and the rest were kind of scattered out around the city and the region. So with the survey itself, we want to start off by getting a sense of whether or not people had a bit of a relationship to the location. So we asked whether or not people visited the downtown core and how often they did. The purpose was not necessarily to say that people who weren't visiting, their opinions matter as well, of course, but just to get a sense of whether the people completing the survey did have kind of an existing relationship to the downtown area. So what we saw is that a lot of people completing the survey visited downtown either every day or at least once or twice a week, which is great. Then we asked what the reason was for visiting downtown. We saw that primarily people visiting for either business or personal pleasure. This was interesting because we noted as we were checking into the survey results throughout the consultation program, we noticed that not a lot of residents from the area downtown were completing the survey, which is why we then sent out the letter and did the face-to-face discussions to try to correct some of that and make sure that those people who would be most impacted by any sort of development on the site would be heard. So then we provide some questions regarding development and revitalization, asking whether or not people felt that developing the Harborview lands would help revitalize the area. What we saw is that about 57% of respondents felt that it would help revitalize the downtown area. About 33% said that they didn't think it would, and about 10% were unsure. So for the survey, we did a bit of a branching survey. So people who answered yes to this question were then provided additional extra questions about development and their preferences. So we asked, what type of development do you think is suitable for the Harborview lands? And what we see here is quite a interesting spread. People thinking, people not too interested in office space per se for the area, mostly interested in live-work, mixed-use development, which is pretty exciting, but pretty even spread across the board in terms of types of uses that people are interested in. That to say, I think it's important to kind of say as well that none of these things are necessarily diametrically opposed. So there's nothing that would stop us from having a housing development that also had park space or a tourist accommodation and commercial, right? These things can also be combined together, but this was just to get a sense of what people were interested in. Then we asked people who had responded yes to question number 3 if they wanted to see just a portion of the land developed or the total site developed. And interesting here, we saw that a majority of people were saying that they did want to see all of the land developed, about 73%. So that's kind of an interesting finding. This here, I generated a word cloud analysis of one of the open-ended questions that we had. So this is I took all the open-ended questions, ran them through this program, and it generates this kind of cloud of the 50 most commonly used words. And then I use this to kind of identify some themes from that the open-ended comments that we got from people about the Harborview lands. So one of the themes here we see is a development theme. People kind of interested in developing the site for commercial housing, for parking. They wanted to see some sort of development happening there. Next theme was regarding green space and park space. So people recognizing that the area is attractive because of the trees and the views, and that it has a park-like feeling. Another theme was people acknowledging that there's having a desire for public and community space, recognizing that the area should really be preserved, or some part of it should be preserved for public goods or public access. And then finally, the last theme here being proximity and location coming out through this. So people kind of recognizing that what makes this site so important is the fact that it's close to the Harbor Quay, that it has a great view, it's close to Argyle. Really that proximity and location and the access to other surrounding amenities is what makes it so important for that public space, for that green space, for that development. So then shifting over to the ideas platform, again, that's part of the Let's Connect PA. These ideas were submitted by the public just in general open-ended thoughts about what we could do with the site. So a couple different ideas coming out through here in terms of the themes. Some people suggested seniors housing, or development of high-end mixed-use building or apartment-style building. Some other people suggested that maybe a portion of the site could be developed and we could preserve some of it for treat space. Another idea was to preserve the whole thing for a protected park. I thought one interesting idea was to do an architectural competition to gather ideas for some sort of development. Another idea that was submitted was obtaining adjacent properties from Western Forest products. Some other ideas that involved the dilapidated, that the city should maybe focus on dilapidated buildings and revitalization of other areas of land through infill and redevelopment before developing these lands. And then also using the space for public recreation facilities. So whole variety of different ideas there kind of submitted from the public. Looking over at the Facebook comments, we pulled together some of the key themes that emerged throughout that discussion. Very similar to the ideas, a preference for the trees and preserving the site for the eagles, placing some emphasis on the importance of the natural setting. Again, some people suggesting that selling a portion of the land might be advantageous while keeping part of it for green space, so kind of doing a bit of a mixed development there. Converting the land completely into a park was another theme that came up through the Facebook comments. Using the land and selling for funds for infrastructure projects. Again, we see some more comments on Facebook about developing the land or using it for public assets. And then finally, there were some comments about leaving it as is and focusing again on infill and redevelopment in other areas of the city first. Finally, looking at the comments from the neighborhood engagement. So again, this was the communications manager going around and speaking with 16 residents and businesses. There were kind of two ends of the spectrum of the conversation coming out here. Some people saying that they were kind of concerned that they were going to lose this green space that they used as a local neighborhood park, whereas others were excited about the prospect of development and revitalization. So in conclusion, really similar to most things, the community has mixed opinions about the future of the Harborview lands. I think, again, at the two ends of the spectrum, we see people saying, you know, leave it as is, save it and preserve it as a green space. And then other people are saying, you know, develop it and do something really innovative and exciting there to help revitalize the area. Ultimately, I think based on the spectrum of comments provided, there's probably a balanced approach that the city could take. That could mirror the types of comments that we heard from the community, and that would probably involve developing a portion of the land while being very mindful and putting specific caveats around public open space and preserving some area for park and saving some of the trees, and then emphasizing connectivity in the neighborhood through the development. So yeah, that's the findings of the consultation program.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Questions from council? Councillor Corbeil.
Just a question about the nesting eagles. Do we know what kind of setbacks would have to be in place if somebody was going to construct condos or whatever?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm wondering if that's a conversation that's been had in the past.
CEO?
Madam Mayor, I've heard comments about eagles in the area. I don't know that they're nesting. If we are going to consider development there, we'll engage a professional to advise us on what we have to do.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Poon? Okay. Councillor Solda? No? Councillor Paulson?
No, I think it's great to get an overview like that to begin with, and we have some decisions to make.
That's right. Councillor Washington? Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much for the report. So, council, we can take this and just sit on it for a while. We'll get to that. Or we can give direction to start a process today. I would imagine if we were going to start a process of any kind, probably what we would be doing is directing staff to start working on an RFP that would then be brought back for us to consider further. So we wouldn't actually be putting anything out to the public at this point, but just directing that we want to start that work. Councillor Solda.
So, Madam Mayor, if I may?
Sure.
I move that, first I'll move this one and then I'll make a motion right after. I'll move that the report from the Manager of Planning and Communications Manager dated March 6, 2019 be received.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, any further questions on the report? All in favor? Carried. Councillor Haggard?
I am in favor of the motion.
Thank you.
And
Councillor
Madam
Solda.
Mayor, I'll move that staff be directed to put out an RFP and bring it back to council.
Is there a seconder? I'll second. Yeah, and I think before we decide, or we should definitely be putting to context if we want that to be an RFP for the entire site, a portion of the site, if we want to, so maybe we can have conversation around it and then we could
amend it.
Yeah. Councillor Poon.
I feel that we should be considering this after our strategic planning, but I do like the idea of having development there, and I think that we could probably incorporate many of those ideas that people have come up with.
Great, thank you. Councillor Solda.
And the last time this went out for RFP, there was a lot of, I was part of that council, and we went to the Capitol Theatre. It was full. Only one person spoke for the project, the RFP. And when I went and talked to the businesses in that area, they went, "Oh, we wish you had gone ahead with it." And I went, "Well, where was your voice?" And they said, "Well, we were afraid people would not come into our businesses." I believe on that particular site that there is a way to save some of the trees, majority of them, as well as you'll have to take some down. There's also geotech that has to be done on that particular land, whoever puts it in. So I think it's a great way to explore, to see what other people talk about. Maybe there's a boutique hotel that's interested in coming. Maybe it's something else. We don't know till we put it out there.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think that there's a lot more work to do on this topic. I think we need to consider for sure if there are eagles' nests there. I certainly don't want all of those trees cut down. I think we can enhance the park space. I would like to see us give consideration to some kind of First Nations art piece there, because I think it is, that whole area is generally a site that's important to our local First Nations. I don't want to see us make any decisions on, moving forward with putting out an RFP until we hear from First Nations. It doesn't mean we can't start the process of having staff prepare it, because that will take some time, and that would definitely come back after our strategic planning as well. But I think we have quite a few more steps to go through. This has been a great start to get some community feedback. Yeah. Further? CAO?
Madam Mayor, I understand the motion on the floor is that staff bring back an RFP. Can you give us some detail on that? In terms of, in the motion, please, in terms of all or portion of the land, some of the things that were just discussed.
So,
and is there any specific use you want to go to RFP for, or do you want to just test the market, see what uses come forward?
I would advocate that we test the market and see what developers want to do with the area. I would also like to see us not limit it too much, but put things in the RFP like that we will put value on tree retention and park space being around it. Yeah, Councillor Solda?
I would concur with that, Madam Mayor. I would definitely. I just wanted to touch base because I do believe that we could save some of the trees.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to agree with that. There's parking issues and stuff like that, so that'll all come, that's the weeds right now. I'm not worried about that.
Any comments from this end of the table?
Oh, I'll just talk.
Councillor Paulson?
Yeah. No, I think that you put out an RFP for the full site, and a proponent may come back with some kind of imaginative thought of what it would look like. I think we don't know what it would look like unless we put it out there. So let's test the waters and see. We take the information that is provided through the survey, and certainly we take what happened previously to heart. But I'm still a firm believer that somewhere along the line there's middle ground that you can come up with a development that will suit green space and people will be able to use it as well. So I'm a firm believer that we can find a solution.
Absolutely. Councillor Haggard, do you have any comments?
I concur with Councillor Colson. It's very valuable space that we have there, and it's too valuable to leave as a parking lot. I think we can do a lot better, and I think we could come up with some great art. The developers will come up with some great ideas that really enhance that area and improve our uptown core. So I'm in favor of moving forward with an RFP for the whole space.
Thank you. Councillor Solda?
Madam Mayor, any developer that's going to put in an RFP, they're going to do their homework. They're going to go and look at the history and where they're going with it, and they're going to see the comments that people have made and suggestions that people have made. So I think if you don't, I guess you're not much of a developer, are you? So,
Councillor Poon?
I'm in favor of this motion, but I feel that we might need to be a bit more specific on what we're looking for before developers spend too much money on giving us an RFP.
So I would say, generally, I think that what has been put forward in the survey, is there anything in there that council is not open to? Because there was a number of uses considered. I don't think we're going to get a big office building development. I wouldn't support a big office building there, I guess. So what I'm hearing through the conversation is that council wants to put out to the market to test or start the process of preparing an RFP, test the market for up to the entire site, all or a portion of the site, value on tree retention and park space surrounding a development. Is there anything that I'm missing here? Councillor Corbeil?
Just to be clear, we're asking staff to bring back
Yep.
an RFP for us to review before it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Do we need any further clarity in that motion?
Can we hear what the motion is?
Well, the motion is just to put out an RFP.
And I've heard a range of things from council here, including put out the whole property and with value statements, and also put out a portion of the property. So we can bring back an RFP and you can refine it then.
I don't think
if
you've
that's what you
heard
wanna
put
do.
out a portion of the property. I think we've all talked about put out for RFP for the entire thing. And I mean, we can add these details in afterward, but I would say we could include in the motion that we want value put on tree retention, park space surrounding and development. I can't remember the other couple things I just listed.
We'll bring back
but
an RFP.
This is all being
And
recorded.
Up to.
Yeah, up to the entire site, so
Yes.
all or a portion. Okay, so that's not in the motion, but it is in the recording of this. I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding, so.
Madam Mayor, do you want that in the motion, or would you like that in the motion, or just they have the information, the staff?
I think they've got the information.
Okay.
Our economic development manager is probably not going to write the RFP without watching this video.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So on that, seeing no further questions, all in favor? Councillor Haggard?
I'm in favor of the motion.
Thank you. Carried. Okay. Okay, on to item 4, which is from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage, Alberni Harbour Key Lease, Unit Number 6, patio installation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All Mixed Up is the current tenant of Unit 6 at Harbour Key, and they're interested in converting 2 existing spaces adjacent to their premises into patios with the eventual goal of acquiring a liquor license. Per the attached photos there on the second page of the report, in the event that All Mixed Up is successful with acquiring a liquor license, pedestrian traffic would be directed outward beyond the current covered canopy. And at that time, staff would look at exploring moving some of the planters in the surrounding area to ensure pedestrian safety. Staff fully supports the request by the tenant and is recommending council approve in principle the creation of patio space, and the tenant is in the audience if council wishes to engage him.
Thank you. Council, are there any questions on this application? Councillor Solda.
I always wondered why they didn't develop the back end into a patio, because it looks out on something that's beautiful out there. So I think it's a positive, and I'm just kind of curious. So if they want to put a patio in the front end, would that mean building it up or just leaving it flat and putting tables? How is that? I'm just kind of curious to know.
So it hasn't been determined at this stage. It could stay flush with the current brickwork there, and the opening of course, the garage door that you see on the right-hand side. So the only time there would be a fixed barrier with gates would be in the event that the tenant does receive a liquor license. So it would be a cordoned off permanent barrier. Without a liquor license, just with a food primary license, it wouldn't be required to be cordoned off as much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Who would be responsible for moving the heat pump? Is that the responsibility of the cities or the tenants?
I would review with staff to confirm whose responsibility that would be.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Poon.
I think this is a positive initiative, and I think it must mean that business is good. So I'm happy to see this.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard, any comments or questions?
Just to comment, I'm really pleased that this is going to happen. I think it's going to be a great enhancement to the Harbour Key area. I'm in favor of the motion.
Thank you. Anything down here?
No, I think it's...
Councillor Washington?
I guess the propane tanks are included with that heat pump relocation?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And I'll just add that I think this is a great expansion of the good work that's going on at the Harbour Key, and I think this will just add to the vibrancy down there. So I'm excited about the potential of this happening as well. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to make the motion?
I move that the report from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage dated February 27th, 2019 be received, and Council for the City of Port Alberni approve in principle the creation of patio space to the front and rear of AHQ Unit Number 6 and amend the lease as required to accommodate the new provisions.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Councillor Haggard.
I'm in favor of the motion.
Thank you, still carried. Okay, thank you very much. On to item 5 from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage again, the Parks Canada grant update from McLean Mill.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just to confirm with Council, we have received preliminary confirmation of the $60,000 Parks Canada cost sharing grant for the McLean Mill. So that would be $60,000 provided by the grant, and the department would match, that we've already discussed through the budget process, that the city would match that $60,000 figure. The scope of the project is outlined on my report, and the structures that were selected for this round of grant funding were based on the site assessment that was completed in 2018. So in the 2018 Parks Canada cost sharing agreement, we completed the site assessment, and so now this represents the first phase of implementing the recommendations by the John Dam report.
Okay. Councillor Washington first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So all this money will be going towards the mill. There's no extra couple bucks for a train in there or anything. It's all mill revitalization.
That's correct. So, Madam Mayor, as it's outlined on my report, there are 4 different structures we're exploring. So the Arnold McLean Garage, there's a variety of projects done specifically with the garage, and then the temporary roofs on the workers' house, cookhouse, and garage. So the train is not included in this grant.
Thank you. Good try. Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I love getting money from the government and that, but my problem is that it's all temporary. You know, when I see temporary this, temporary, and I'm one that, if you're going to do it, let's do it, right? So can you just explain why we're doing temporary?
Yes, so Madam Mayor, just to clarify, on the Arnold McLean Garage, that is not temporary work. So that is to refurbish the structure itself. Regarding the workers' house, cookhouse, and garage, where we've slated temporary roofs, staff have explored the potential, if we can, within budget limitations. If we can go permanent, absolutely we will. The intention behind temporary roofs is the ability to essentially press pause on the deterioration and to avoid further deterioration for the elements that we've currently considered. And so, of course, absolutely, whenever possible, we will look at permanent fixes. In the event that they aren't possible within the current budget, then this is the intention of the temporary roofs. So for the future phases, we can consider then exploring the next steps with those structures. Again, keeping in mind there's many critical elements that Mr. Dam outlined in his report and finite resources.
So one more question. So when we talk about temporary, how long would it last, like a temporary roof? I mean, before you really have to do something.
I would have to confirm once of course, we haven't started the project yet, so the funding isn't available until April 1st. So the funding period runs April 1 to December 31 of 2019. So we haven't confirmed with specific contractors yet and all the rest of it to get that organized. But the intention is that those structures, those roofs would last long enough for us to be able to make a permanent fix, or there's no sense in putting a temporary roof up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Corbeil.
Ms. Thorpe, I'm sure it's been done before, but somebody has to talk to Heritage Canada or whoever you talk to try to do these period correct is going to cost more money than we'll ever be able to get. And I know Madam Mayor is going to be speaking to people at the FCM. Hopefully we can get to a point where we can, replace the roofs good enough. They look historic. They may not be period correct, but something that's a little bit more affordable, because at the rate we're going, it's going to cost a heck of a lot of money to completely keep that facility in the shape it is today.
And Madam Mayor, of course, the budget is based on that, as Councillor Corbeil mentioned, that sort of period correct or ensuring that we continue to stay on side with National Historic Site designation. So those numbers reflect those steps taken.
Thank you. And yeah, I just want to echo the same concerns.
I'm thrilled to have, gotten the grant. And I think it's important to note as well that 30,000 is coming from us and 30,000 is coming from the ACRD. So they are contributing to this project as well. And then 60,000 from the federal government. So this is a great example of, us extending our reach with the help of partners. But at the same time, I think $120,000 to do a couple temporary roofs and fix the garage building was quite shocking to me, because I just think, how are we ever going to be able to catch up the work that needs to be done at McLean Mill to keep the National Historic Site designation. So I think it is a conversation that will continue, because there's going to be a huge cost associated with it. And of course, the money has not been put into that. So there is this, maintenance backlog. And that's why we're in the situation that we're in. But it is a very challenging number to comprehend. I wouldn't spend $120,000 on a garage if it's so for myself. So it is very challenging to think $120,000 because it's a National Historic Site. Yes. So we're thankful for the money, but also concerned by the number. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a final comment. I know in the past there was a pitch made by one of the societies to become friends of the McLean Mill and sponsor buildings to say Canadian Maritime Engineering do the blacksmith shop, and one of the food stores do the kitchen, or something like that, or even a roofing company to go up there and put some black shingles on the roofs to make them period correct. Do you know if the MMS has explored that opportunity recently?
Madam Mayor, I'm not sure at this stage where the McLean Mill has taken sponsorship opportunities.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay. Somebody like to move receipt of the report? So moved, Madam Mayor. Is there a seconder? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you for the report, and thanks for your work on getting the grant. Okay, on to item 6 from the Manager of Bylaw, and Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I would like to be excused from this topic, this particular property, because I've known the person for over 30 years and there's a big history. So I will excuse myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so from the Manager of Bylaw Service, we have remedial action requirement for 2808 10th Avenue. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Usually don't have a binder this thick, but I have many things on the agenda today that requires writing down. So, Madam Mayor, before I begin going into detail on this remedial action requirement consideration, I want to preface both of my remedial action reports before you today. I just want to start by saying that there's many files currently ongoing within the Bylaw Services Department that require some form of attention, some form of enforcement. And Bylaw Services is a new department, so there are certain properties in this community that have needed remedial action requirements or some form of remediation for some time that might not necessarily have been brought to your attention in the past. So that's not placing blame anywhere. It's just the reality of not having an established department or a bylaw manager who can kind of sift through the files and prioritize and bring to your attention the ones that do need action and your consideration on. And when I say prioritizing, I want to be clear that includes, safety, nuisance abatement, which refers to our nuisance abatement bylaw. So for calls relating to nuisance behavior, as well as nuisance defined under the community charter, which can be structures themselves or buildings or sometimes even drainage dikes or holes or things like that. So I do need to emphasize as well the files that I bring before you aren't brought lightly. They're files that, in my opinion and professional experience, are absolutely necessary to be brought to light in public view, as well as your view for consideration and action. All files that come forward are reviewed by the nuisance working group, not just on one occasion for consideration. These are files that have been, or properties that have been added to our watch list that we review on a monthly basis until we reach a point where remediation from council is required to be considered. And I just also want to emphasize that all of these files that come before you, progressive action is always taken by the Bylaw Services Department. And what that means is we ultimately seek voluntary compliance. We follow up with letters. We follow up with fines and tickets. We follow up with remediation through city staff or contractors to complete work that can be required, or that can be completed by those workers. We conduct site inspections and so forth. So the list just continues of all the actions we take. And it's only when city staff have exhausted every option available and we still consider that there's a safety concern to the property that these files are brought forward to you for consideration of a remedial action requirement. And although some of my reports seem repetitive, I'll just remind you that they do need to be considered on a case-by-case basis. So a lot of the legislative background that you might see or authorities that's repeated is because you're considering each property case by case. So with that being said, I'll start with my first report for consideration, and that's 2808 10th Avenue. And the request before you is to declare this property a nuisance under the Community Charter, Section 74, where a council has the authority to impose a remedial action requirement for any matter or thing that council considers so dilapidated or unclean as to be offensive to the community. The request today is there's a number of options that a council can impose, and it's just my recommendation. Council can choose a different option, but it's staff's recommendation to fully remediate the property today, put that order in place. It's important to note that there is case law all across BC that emphasizes a local government's ability to take community standards into account in finding a building or structure comparatively offensive due to dilapidation or uncleanliness. And so for this specific property, this is a property that has not complied with any request to date. It receives ongoing calls in relations to nuisance behavior. It meets the city's definitions as unsightly or offensive in appearance. And it's been inspected on a number of occasions, and it's been determined that there are health and safety issues regarding the sanitation within the building, as well as unsafe materials within and on the exterior of the premise. So we have a couple bylaws in place here at the city. The property maintenance bylaw is intended to protect the community from unsightly, hazardous, and blighting conditions that contribute to the deterioration of neighborhoods. We have a building standards bylaw that it's very thorough in requiring safe conditions of these structures be met. It also provides staff with the authority to remediate at the owner's expense, and so any property maintenance conducted will be applied as basically as taxes and utility bills. So, if we have all of these bylaws in place, why am I here before you today? And the reason is when compliance with city bylaws cannot be reached, when tickets remain unpaid, when the city incurs the cost for contractors or staff to go out and remediate the property, those aren't repaid, they remain outstanding, and property taxes become in arrears, city staff have officially exhausted their means of achieving compliance, and we now require council's assistance and consideration to impose a remedial action requirement. So for this property, this is the case. We have an owner, Ms. Lori Strickland. It's staff's understanding she no longer resides on the premise. And I just want to give you some quick stats. So we had ongoing calls throughout the years, and early last year, the property was boarded voluntarily to a portion, and that was the result of some unsafe materials, needles, and some raw sewage in the basement portion of the dwelling. So for 2018 and 2019, a total of 7 bylaw notice tickets were issued. A total of 12 for the duration of an ongoing file with the city were issued. 0 have been paid, which totals $2,500, $2,536 owing to the city for tickets. In 2018, there was $4,519.80 owed in contractor fees, which remains unpaid and applied to taxes. In 2019, keep in mind this is just January and February of this year, we've already accumulated, the property has already accumulated $651.85 in contractor fees, which remains unpaid. There have been a total of 5 formal letters and 16 on-site inspections. And in 2018 alone, there were 18 calls from the RCMP for non-emergent related calls, so nuisance calls. I want council to keep in mind that we only have 2 bylaw officers and 1 building official. So for a property to take up this amount of resources, it's pretty pressing, I would say. So what am I seeking here today? On behalf of Bylaw Services, I'm seeking council's consideration to order that the property be declared a nuisance, and this is under the Community Charter, Section 74. I'm asking for your consideration to impose a remedial action that the property be fully remediated to become compliant with BC Building Code, BC Fire Code, and city bylaws referenced. And I'm further recommending for this property that council designate this property a nuisance under our nuisance abatement bylaw in order to recover the costs for on-site inspections that are non-emergent. Under the community charter, it's pretty standard to have, if council chooses to impose this remedial action requirement, 30 days to remediate, and an opportunity, 14 days for an opportunity for the property owner to appeal this decision. And finally, my reports outline, I'm not going to go through them, but it outlines next steps if this remedial action is imposed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the work you've done on this. Council, are there questions? Councillor Paulson.
I don't really have a question. It's more of a statement. In listening to the background report, it's unfortunate when an owner or renter puts themselves into this situation where it's backlogged and basically you've exhausted pretty well all of your steps, and it really leaves us in a no-win situation with regards to moving forward, and they've really left us with no choice here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And my questions are, since this has been on social media, I've seen a number of people say, well, it's not going to make a difference. The city has ticketed before and it just goes back, it gets cleaned up and goes back to normal. And so I know you've got your steps in here, that will conduct inspections and that kind of thing. But what really happens if it's not met, and how does the fact that it's a tenant and not an owner potentially play into that as well? Like, would we be, is the property at the point where we would be putting a do not occupy on the house, or is there another way?
Madam Mayor, at this point, the remedial action, the purpose to impose this remedial action is to get a better understanding of the property as well. With residential, unless it's complaint driven and we have agreements to come and do inside inspections, it's very difficult to gain access. So based on all the knowledge we have, it's quite extensive to be confident to impose this remedial action requirement at this time. In my next steps, it highlights that if the owner faults, and it's always the owner, not the tenant, if the owner fails to complete it, then city staff will have the authority to go in and to remediate the work. And what that will do is allow us to get an idea of how extensive the work required is. Do we need hazardous materials assessment completed? If the building is even sound enough to stand. There's a reason I didn't go for proposing a demolishment, is because we don't really have a clear understanding at this point how significant the work is. We just know that it's significant enough that we need to take action. So next steps, I agree there's always a potential that we'll pay this cost and incur this cost. It can always be recovered though, so this type of action can be applied to property taxes, and given that the owner is already in arrears, it is a longer process, but there is the opportunity for the city to recover those costs through taking possession of the property at that time. Further to that, it could be, I stand before you to say that it needs to be demolished due to its state, and at that time, again, we could go through the same actions of recovering costs.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Washington, any questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I drove by this morning and it was looking a little cleaner on the front, but I know that just can't be. All your letter, your correspondence here to the owner is addressed to the house. You said she's no longer living there. Are you contacting her where she resides now as well? So she's aware of all this?
Madam Mayor, we have been in contact with the property owner for some time. This has been on the watch list. To give you an idea, this property has been on the nuisance group watch list since I first started, before I even chaired the group. There has been ongoing correspondence. The owner has been very forthwith that they have no plans to remediate, the funds to do so, and are not willing to sell and move on at this time. So we have been in contact. There's no requirement to advise them of the meeting today. Typically, as standard practice, we do. I will be forthwith that Ms. Strickland hasn't been advised of today, and the rationale is because the phone number we've been in correspondence with her for the last month has recently been disconnected. So we have no means of contacting her. This is the address she has on our records, which owners are required to update if they relocate. So we will be following up to track her down and determine. Just want to be forthwith on that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pooner, Councillor Corbeil? Okay. Councillor Paulson, would you like to read the motions?
I'd like to move that council, pursuant to the authority provided in section 74 of the community charter, and after reviewing the information provided in this report, declares that the building located on the property at 2808 10th Avenue, having a legal description of Lot 10, Block 163, District Lot 1, Alberni District Plan VIP 197B, is so dilapidated or unclean as to be offensive to the community, and as a result is declared a nuisance that requires remedial action to fully restore the damaged building and bring the property into compliance with the City of Port Alberni's Building Standards Bylaw number 4975 and Property Maintenance Bylaw number 4712, as well as the BC Building Code and BC Fire Code.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Are there, yeah, to the end? Okay.
I mean, it's just keep right on going.
Keep going.
Okay. And further, that council pursuant to section 76 of the community charter sets the time limit for completion of all remedial action requirements described in recommendation 1 to be not later than 5 p.m. on April 19th, 2019. Number 2, and further that council pursuant to section 76 of the community charter sets the time limit for giving notice of a request for council to reconsider the remedial action requirements described in recommendation 2 to be no later than 5 p.m. on March 29th, 2019. 1, and further that council authorizes city staff to take all appropriate action in accordance with section 17 municipal action at defaulter's expense of the community charter to ensure the subject property is brought into compliance with all remedial action requirements described in recommendation 1, provided that A, the property owner representative has not fully completed the remedial action requirements on or before the time limited specified in the council resolution, and B, all costs incurred by the city to bring the property into compliance shall be at the expense of the property owner or representative and pursuant to section 17 of the community charter. Such costs shall be recovered from the property owner as a debt owed to the City of Port Alberni.
Okay, is there a seconder? Second. Are there any further questions or comments on this motion? We'll do that next.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor? Carried.
I move that we
Councillor
receive
Paulson?
the report.
I'll second.
Sorry about that.
Any further questions on the report? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And number 7 from the manager of bylaw.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Solda coming back in.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this may be a little repetitive to start, but in the interest of procedural fairness, it needs to be said for this consideration. So under section 74(2) of the community charter, council has the authority to declare a property a nuisance and to impose a remedial action requirement for any matter or thing that council considers so dilapidated or unclean as to be offensive to the community. So the subject property for this report is 4781 Margaret Street, and the request today is for council's consideration to impose a remedial action requirement to demolish the building on site. So again, under the property maintenance bylaw, the purpose and intention is to protect the community from unsightly, hazardous, and blighting conditions that contribute to the deterioration of neighborhoods. We have a building standards bylaw here at the city, which is very thorough in requiring safe conditions of these structures be met. It also provides city staff with the authority to remediate at the owner's expense, and that power comes directly from the community charter as well. So the property owner of this 4781 Margaret Street is Mr. Stephen Bowden, who has not resided on site for some time. The dwelling did contain several occupants, all of which city staff understands were not authorized to be there by the property owner. The house has had no services, in specific electrical, to it for some time. And upon on-site inspections continually ongoing, it was determined that the occupants were accumulating new garbage or rubbish regularly, faster than the city could have city staff or contractors remediate. To date, no fines were paid for 2018-2019. Contracted services remain to remediate the property remain unpaid, and taxes are currently in arrears. I want to give some stats again for 2018-2019. In total, for total, not 2018-19, there were a total of 24 tickets issued to this property, 5 of which were issued in 2016 and paid. That was with a previous owner. Since a new owner came in, Mr. Bowden, for 2018-2019, there are 19 outstanding tickets, none of which have been paid, and which total $3,300 owing to the city. In 2018, a total of $1,302.50 remain outstanding in contractor fees. In 2019, keep in mind this is just January and February of this year alone, a total of $2,232 in contractor fees has been, to remediate the property, remains unpaid. You can see that's escalated quite quickly, and that's because bylaw services believed there were some immediate threats to the property that needed to be addressed. To break it down even further for you, in just 4 months, so between October 27th, 2018 and February 27th, 2019, a total of 18 tickets were issued, a total of 5 formal letters sent, 7 formal complaints received, all of which were different complainants, so 7, and a total of 10 formal on-site inspections occurred by bylaw services. On January 21st, 2019, a fire call was dispatched for the Port Alberni Fire Department. They attended. Gas was shut off and the meter was locked by Fortis due to safety concerns. My report highlights a generator being run, some propane tanks, electrical cords running to the neighbors, and that was a bulk of our complaints received from the neighbors saying that they were trying to run extension cords and steal power because there was no electricity to the dwelling for quite a few years. And the report also highlights that RCMP attended. They identified concerns and the status of the occupants, and the fire report in general highlights excessive non-compliant use of electrical cords, space heaters inside the residence, evidence of rodents, and a large amount of combustible materials throughout the house. Fast forward to March 2nd, 2019, where a structural fire occurred to the premises. Port Alberni Fire Department attended for the structural fire, and the building was boarded by the fire department, and I have since had conversations with the fire chief, who's reported that the structure needs to come down and should not be inhabited. Madam Mayor, I am truly grateful that no one was injured or killed in this fire and that no other properties were drastically affected. I do, however, have major concerns that this property has been on the nuisance working group watch list for some time. Proper processes and steps were taken by all departments to gather evidence, work towards compliance, and ultimately be considered before you for remediation. I just want to comment that, and this will play in later to a bylaw sitting for amendment. The Bylaw Services Department has no authority to take action if immediate safety concerns exist. And so what I mean by that, the amendments proposed later this afternoon that you'll see discuss, when a building doesn't have any services to it, it hasn't had electricity or water or, any services going to it. When the owner is no longer residing on site or residing in unsafe conditions, there's no authority for us to go in and enforce. So you'll see it later, but I just want to preface there to say, this is a pretty strong case in point of where enforcement action is needed on, a very critical and severe case. So with that being said, everything in my report highlights city staff believing that all options had been exhausted for compliance. The report was actually prepared for you on March 1st, and on March 2nd a fire occurred. So just gives you a high level of, the files that come before you, how significant they are in the Bylaw Services Department's view. And just to note, it's also worth noting that the property doesn't have, it's my understanding they don't have insurance for the fire, so the remediation required to demolish, if it imposed by council, would be incurred by the city and added to taxes and so forth, and ultimately reclaimed that way.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Solda.
Yeah. So, Madam Mayor, I'm just kind of curious to know if we've heard from the owner at all since the fire. I mean, we watched it from where I work, right? So I'm just kind of curious.
Bylaw Services has not, and I don't see the fire chief present to answer that question.
Okay, we haven't. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Paulson.
I just have some concerns. I drove by it day before yesterday, and it looks like people are in there. There's a couple of pretty mobile-looking vehicles parked out back, and I'm just wondering if they haven't gained access to have a roof over their heads, and I realize they shouldn't. That was the impression I got when I kind of drove around the block, and it's a concern. Like, it's huge. If there's been a fire and there's time for it to come down.
Madam Mayor, I will comment. Following the fire incident, I was put in touch with a few of the neighbors who commented that one of the trailers on site was being lived in. They just basically moved out and went in the trailer. As part of this process, we would be conducting routine inspections prior to an order for demolishment to ensure that there's no occupancy and that it's fully secured. As well, I have moved forward with Bylaw Services taking action to remediate, so having all the vehicles towed, the trailer gone, and the property on the outside remediated at the owner's expense as a starting process.
That could be there's a very large motorhome on site. Yeah. So it is about 30 feet.
There is.
Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So your correspondence began with the owner in 2013, and he's not responded to the city since 2013? Am I reading that right?
The complaint files for the property began in 2013. The bulk of our correspondence with the new owner, the current owner, began in 2018. He did not reside on the property and had no intention. He ignored all the requests. I will comment and say Bylaw Services did go as far as attending his work to deliver notices, which didn't receive response or action.
Okay. Councillor Poon.
I have a question, but more generally speaking, you said you're working on a list. How many properties are on that list?
Off the top of my head, I would say there are probably about 5 or more. The nuisance working group is a very effective tool that was established for the city, and properties will be brought to the attention, and we have the opportunity to cross-reference with different departments to see where those overlaps exist and what might need to be considered a nuisance. So,
thank you.
Okay. And Councillor Haggard, her phone call ended, but I do have a comment from her here. She said, this council is serious about cleaning up the community. She's in favor of the motion as presented. And thank you for all the work that you've done. And of course, the motion's not presented yet. We haven't read it. But Councillor Washington, would you like to read those motions? All we have to do are read the long motions.
Yeah.
Staff had to write the report.
I move that the report dated March 5th, 2019 from the manager of the bylaw services be received.
That's right. Any questions or comments on the report? All in favor? Carried.
Reading me that council pursuant to the authority provided in section 74 of the community charter, after reviewing the information provided in this report, declares that the building located on the property of 4781 Margaret Street, having a legal description of Lot 4, District Lot 1, Alberni District Plan VIP 5700, is so dilapidated or unclean as to be offensive to the community, and that as a result is declared a nuisance that requires remedial action to demolish and remove the damaged building and to level the site in order to eliminate the nuisance. And further, that council imposes that the following remedial action requirements on the property: ownership representative, registered owner, and on the title is Mr. Stephen Bowden, for the building located at the property at 4781 Margaret Street with respect to the building noted in the above recommendation number 1. A, to demolish the damaged building. B, to remove all debris from the demolish and to appropriate disposal site and to level the site in order to eliminate the declared nuisance. Whatever happened to motion to concur with the request?
Motion to concur with what's written.
And further, that council pursuant to section 76 of the community charter sets a time limit for completion of all remedial action requirements described in recommendation 1, not to be later than 5 p.m. on April 12, 2019. And further, that council pursuant to section 76 of the community charter sets a time limit for giving notice of the request for the council to reconsider the remedial action requirements described in recommendation 2 be no later than 5 p.m. on March 26, 2019. And further, that council authorize city staff to take all appropriate action in accordance to section 17, municipal action at the defaulter's expense of the community charter, to ensure the subject property is brought into compliance with all remedial action requirements described in recommendation 2, provided that A, the property owner / representative is not fully completed in the remedial action requirements on or before the time limit specified in council resolution, and all costs incurring by the city to bring the property into compliance shall be at the expense of the property owner representative and should be pursuant to section 17 of the community charter. Such costs shall be recovered from the property owner as a debt owed to the city of Port Alberni.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Okay, and we've been going for about 2.5 hours, so I'm going to suggest that we take a 10-minute recess. And getting started with item 8 is from the Manager of Planning, Development Permit number 1808 for 3508 4th Avenue. Welcome.
So in front of you for consideration is the application for development permit number 1808. This development permit will facilitate the construction of a new steel frame building at 3508 4th Avenue to be used to store materials and equipment that are currently exposed on site. The property is designated as general commercial in the official community plan and zoned as C3 service commercial. The property falls within development permit area number 2, commercial, which provides guidelines that cover the form and character of the project to ensure high quality development is achieved. The applicant has submitted plans for the development permit and they meet the intent of the guidelines. These plans can be found in the attached report. The proposed building is a positive improvement for the area, and the architectural features of the building help create a West Coast industrial look. You can kind of see them right up there. So overall, the planning department asks that you support issuing development permit number 1808.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm excited about this because it adds to that area of town. It shows that, you know, we're developing, so let's go ahead. Let's go.
Absolutely. So moved. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Councillor Washington, would you like to make that motion?
I move that the Council of the City of Port Alberni approve development permit number 18-08 and that the city clerk be authorized to sign the permit.
Seeing no further questions, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thanks.
And moving on to bylaws. Our first bylaw being from the city clerk, the Alberni Valley Community Forest Reserve Fund, amendment number 1, bylaw number 4851-1. City clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is just a minor amendment to the bylaw to reflect that while council has the authority to disperse the funds, it will be done following consultation with the Alberni Valley Community Forest Corporation Board. And that was council's previous direction.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Poon, would you like to make that motion?
Yes. I'll move that Alberni Valley Community Forest Reserve Fund Amendment number 1, bylaw number 4854-1 be now introduced and read a first time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried.
I'll move that Alberni Valley Community Forest Reserve Fund Amendment number 1, bylaw number 4854-1 be read a second time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried.
I'll move that Alberni Valley Community Forest Reserve Fund Amendment number 1, bylaw number 4854-1 be read a third time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
And any further questions? Councillor Paulson looked like he's going to put his hand up, but he's pre-voting.
I was pre-voting.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item 2 from the Director of Finance, 5-year financial plan bylaw 2019 to 2023, bylaw number 4894. So this is a report and our budget. Council, are there questions? No. None? I have questions. Okay. So I do have a couple of questions. Let me find my notes.
What's the difference between 2.2 and 2.7?
Yeah, so I think my general question is, at our last budget meeting, based on the amount of money that we took off, I had us at a 2.75% tax increase. And the budget states we're at a 2.2% tax increase. So I'm wondering how we did better.
I would have to compare our math to see what the difference is.
Do you have like a list of the changes that were made or not here? Okay. Okay.
Not in front of me. There was the options list and they were added and checked.
Okay. So one line that I had a question about, I don't think I have the specific line. Oh, the Gertrude Street Bridge rehabilitation. That one shows as 105,000 coming from
unused capital reserve and the rest coming from general.
That was part of that 300,000 in the unallocated reserves that council made a motion to redirect to this year's projects.
And where would we find the rest of that, I guess? So
It'll be the lines that says the unused capital reserve. There was that 105. There was 65,000 for the 8th Avenue Dogwood to Cedarwood Storm Sanitary.
Okay, we don't have to find the
there's rather a
specific
lot
ones,
to
but
go through.
Yeah, so I guess with my questions, my math might be wrong. Yours is probably better than mine, but so if we, I guess I want to make sure that we reduced a halftime police coordinator, and we put the 57,000 that we had in the budget for that into a reserve. So,
Yes.
And then also the McLean Mill money is put into a contingency reserve.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Okay. So we just have a lower than normal or lower than expected budget increase. I guess that's a good thing.
Well, it was 3% overall, and then a 2.2 was for the average single family.
For sure. Yeah. Councillor Corbeil?
Do you have all these documents in front of you, like on page 41, that identifies last year's year end? And the question I have in particular is, it's on line 22-121, and it's the RCMP contract. And we had a budget of $5,353,114, and the actual cost was $3,162,351.58. So a discrepancy of, or a variation of almost $2 million. What does that mean to a layman like myself trying to figure out where does the $2 million go? And if in fact we budgeted $5 million, is there really $2 million sitting somewhere?
Are you looking at the audit committee financial statement?
Yes, on page 41, line 022121.
Okay, that would have been 2018, and
Yeah.
we won't have done an accrual for the final quarter invoice on that, which is about $2 million.
Oh, so it's just the year hadn't been complete.
It's timing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Solda?
Yeah, I have a quick question on the regional district. The regional district hasn't finished their budget and that, so do you just take a guess, or how do you know what the regional district portion is? Because I'm just kind of curious to know how that works.
The regional district will give me warning if it's going to be substantially higher, as in with the airport requisition. I think it was last year or the year before. Otherwise, I base it on what had happened the previous year, and we're collecting from the regional, or collecting for the regional district, and then we're also paying it out. So it's a wash. It doesn't affect the budget.
And unfortunately, a lot of the people that live in the city think that the collection, when we collect for the hospital, we collect for the regional district and the school, and it's taxed, right, that we're doing it. And they don't understand that we just collect it and then we give it back to the parties that are, the governments that are involved.
Yeah, they're pretty strict about that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Would somebody like to, actually, Councillor Solda, would you like to move receipt of the report?
Okay, I move that the report dated February 28th, 2019 from the Director of Finance be received.
Is there a seconder? Second, Madam Mayor. Okay, and I'm just wondering, before we give final reading, could we have a breakdown of the changes that were made? Just because, and maybe, I mean, you weren't at our last budget meeting, but the numbers that we were working from, I can explain this to you more so that you can get an understanding of what my concern is. But the numbers that we were working from with where we had on the agenda that we were at, I just don't understand how we got to 2.2%. So before we have final adoption of it, I would just like to see how we got there. It looks like we would have had to take more out of our budget than we did. So.
No, that's perfectly fine.
Okay,
I'm expecting I probably used a funding source, increased gas tax somewhere or something like that.
Great, thank you. Okay, so on the report, all in favor? Carried. And continue? Sure.
Madam Mayor, I move that the 5-year financial plan bylaw 2019 to 2023, bylaw number 4984, be now introduced and read a first time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Continue.
Okay, I move that the 5-year financial plan bylaw 2019 to 2023, bylaw number 4984, be read a second time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried.
Do you want
And a third.
Okay, I move that the 5-year financial plan bylaw 2019-2023, bylaw number 4984, be read a third time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you very much. And item number 3 from the Manager of Bylaw Services, our Building Standards Amendment number 1, bylaw number 4975-1, 2019.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do want to comment real quick, just so council's aware. I'm not being mean to you when I make those long motions. I have done my homework, and I have been told that they are.
We will step outside later.
They are necessary for legal purposes, so I apologize that they can be lengthy. Madam Mayor, the amendment proposed here is for the Building Standards Bylaw, number 4975-1 is the amendment number. This is a relatively new bylaw that was adopted by this council at the start of their term. And I just want to make a quick change. I referenced it prior, but the change proposes to include the definition of vacant premise to mean any lot, building, or other structure in respect of which water or electricity services have been intentionally discontinued other than for temporary maintenance, repair, or upgrading, so that the condition of the premise is not suitable for human habitation or other occupancy that is normally permitted. So I do really want to emphasize that this is this bylaw, this provision would be imposed under very strict conditions, and that's why you'll see reference that I've given myself, the manager, the power to do so. The rationale is that the intention is to prevent something like the Margaret Street house fire from occurring when services aren't there. It's not a safe condition by the Bylaw Services Department to be in. How can we prevent something like this from occurring? By getting the building boarded up. You'll see reference, it's within 24 hours we post notice, we board it up, and we require that they do not occupy it until it's evaluated or remediated. So that's all that's before you for consideration for this.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions? Seeing none. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read that motion?
I move the report from the Manager of Bylaw Services dated March 5th, 2019 be received.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I'd like to request number 4 and number 5 on the agenda be switched. There's some clerical updates on number 4 that you'd be considering prior to considering number 5.
Great, thank you. Would you like to continue with these motions, though?
I move that the City of Port Alberni Building Standards Amendment number 1 bylaw number 4975-1 2019 be introduced and read a first time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried.
I move that the City of Port Alberni Building Standards Amendment number 1 bylaw number 4975-1 2019 be read a second time.
I'll second.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried.
And I move that City of Port Alberni Building Standards Amendment number 1 bylaw number 4975-1 2019 be read a third time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 5 from the Manager of Bylaw Services, Business Licensing Bylaw, Regulation Bylaw, City of Port Alberni, bylaw number 4951-1.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm too eager. So this is an amendment proposed, and I'll have to walk you through because we've moved a little backwards. So a couple council meetings ago, you heard, January 28th, you heard 2 readings of a newly proposed business license bylaw, which is currently in the public input and consultation period. A part of this new bylaw includes provisions for retail cannabis store regulations. You heard on February 25th upon my recommendation to proceed with 2 retail cannabis applications, despite not having the business license bylaw in place yet. I do apologize in moving forward. Every time I create a bylaw, it creates a ripple effect in other departments. I need to take into consideration a little more strongly. So that being said, in order to proceed and keep moving the retail cannabis provisions, we already have the zoning in place for it. We just need the business license bylaw provisions in place. So I am proposing that amendments be made to include those provisions that have already been read through that bylaw. They are verbatim. Include them in the current business license bylaw, and that won't affect the new business license bylaw proceeding forward as scheduled, but it would just allow us to have our retail cannabis store regulations in place in the event that an application is approved by the province.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Soldo, would you like to move receipt of the report?
I move to receive the manager of bylaw services dated March 6th, 2019 report be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
And are there questions on the report? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And do you want to continue?
Yep. Thank you. I move that the business license regulation bylaw, City of Port Alberni bylaw number 4951-1 be introduced and read a first time.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried.
I'll move that the business license regulation bylaw, City of Port Alberni bylaw number 4951-1 be read a second time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried.
And finally, I'll move that the business license regulation bylaw, City of Port Alberni bylaw number 4951-1 be read a third time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
And are there any questions or comments?
Just a question, Madam Mayor. Did anybody try to apply for the old medical marijuana dispensary license?
Madam Mayor, I have been in contact with a current owner of an unlicensed premise who had previously had a medical marijuana dispensary license, who basically wanted the current provisions to stay in place and obtain a license. And we've had communication that that's not the case, that these have been, I have been directed by council to repeal and introduce retail cannabis rather than medical marijuana dispensaries.
Sorry, so with the elimination of medical marijuana business license, then it's up to the RCMP?
Effective, I'll pull up the date so I have it correct. With the zoning amendment taking place on February 11th of this year, city staff, bylaw enforcement officers attended each premise. There was 4 that had previously been licensed and advised that they were operating unlawfully if they were found to be open, and requested that they cease operation. We advised that we would proceed with ticketing. There's 1 that remains open unlawfully, and RCMP have been notified, and I have been working directly with the drug unit for RCMP to ensure that they're closed down prior to any retail cannabis stores opening.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And back to item 4, manager bylaw.
This is it, I promise. From me, anyway. Madam Mayor, this is just very clerical. The 2 bylaws that you just gave reading to, the building standards and the amendment for the business license bylaw, this is just to introduce those fines being imposed. So Section 4 has been introduced to building standards in terms of failing to maintain a vacant premise and failing to secure a vacant premise. And under the business license bylaw, it's just worth noting that the medical marijuana dispensary provisions have been removed, and you'll see that no other provisions have been added. The rationale is because the provisions added basically require them to be in line and in compliance with provincial and federal regulations, as well as making sure they have a business license, both provisions which are currently in our business license bylaw already, so they don't need specific sections.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Paulson, would you like to move receipt of the report?
I'd like to move that the report from the Manager Bylaw Services dated March the 5th, 2019 be received.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, any questions or comments on the report? All in favor? Carried. Continue.
The bylaw offense notice enforcement bylaw number 4929-4, 2019 be introduced and read a first time.
Is there a
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Okay, any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried.
The bylaw offense notice enforcement bylaw number 4929-4, 2019 be read a second time.
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried.
The bylaw offense notice enforcement bylaw number 4929-4, 2019 be read a third time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Councillor Washington, it is 4:59.
And a half.
Would we like to pre-make our motion to extend the meeting?
We would like to make our pre-motion to extend the meeting as it is approaching 5 p.m. and we are only allowed 3 hours.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Sorry, anyone opposed to that? Carried. Okay, on to correspondence for action. And number one is from the Alberni Valley Hospice Society, a letter dated February 25th, 2019, requesting council waive the building permit fees of $924 for their new location at 2579 10th Avenue, and a report attached from the city clerk. City clerk, do you want to provide any more background on that?
Happy to answer questions, Madam Mayor. It's really straightforward. If council wishes to do that, they're perfectly at liberty to do so. The permit can be waived. Council can pay itself through general revenue, or just proceed with the permit. And just for reference, there is some background as to council's decision when the Friendship Centre came forward with similar request for the daycare facility.
Great, and we do have someone from the Hospice Society here if anyone has any questions. Councillor Solda?
I'm just going to go right in. I think what they're going to be doing in the building and what they do for the community is a positive, very positive. And I'm going to move that the letter dated February 25th, 2019, requesting council waive the building permit fees of $924 for their new location at 2579 10th Avenue, and the report from the city clerk providing background information be received.
Is there a seconder? Okay, any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you for waiting 3 hours for that.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I'm not sure if I missed something, or was that just to receive?
No, it was to waive the fees and receive.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. And item 2 from Leslie Walerius, City Clerk. Oh, sorry. Oh, just a receive. Letter dated March 1st, 2019, requesting council better clarify the financial benefit that the 2019 operating budget as proposed by MMS would provide to the community. Okay. Any questions or comments on this? Okay. Councillor Poon, would you like to make the motion?
Yes, I'll move that the letter dated March 1st, 2019, requesting council better clarify the financial benefit that the 2019 operating budget, as proposed by MMS, would provide to the community, be received.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, any further questions? All in favor? Carried. Opposed? Carried. And item 3 and 3A from Roland Smith. We have a letter dated March 5th, 2019, acknowledging council's decision to curtail operations in 2019 for the train, and then a follow-up letter from March 8th from Mr. Smith. Would somebody like to move receipt?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
And we've had conversation on the train already today, but are there any further comments or questions from anyone? All in favor? Carried. And item 4 from Daniel Savard, we have a letter dated March 4th supporting council's decision to not operate the train in 2019. Somebody like to move receipt?
I'll move that the letter dated March 4th, 2019, supporting council's decision to not operate the train in 2019 be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any comments? All in favor? Carried. And item 5 from Sandy McCruer, a letter dated March 3rd requesting council consider the issue of Alberni paving and their occupation of city-owned lands adjacent to the Fall Fairgrounds. Somebody like to make the motion?
I'll move that the letter dated March 3rd, 2019, requesting councils consider the issue of the Alberni paving and their occupation of city-owned lands adjacent to the Fall Fairgrounds be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
And questions? Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe this came up probably with the past council, but did it just fall through the cracks, City Manager?
Madam Mayor, Council, no, it didn't fall through the cracks. It came up with the previous two councils. The last council revisited the issue and determined that they wanted to enable the occupancy of Alberni paving on city lands and directed staff to begin. So we had pointed out to council that in order to enable it, 3 things would have to happen. We would have to amend the official community plan and the zoning of the land. We would have to basically undertake a rezoning process. We would have to amend the lease with the Fall Fair Association to extend it to cover that area, and then also have to authorize the Fall Fair Association to sublet that property. So the bigger issue is the rezoning, and it's on our work list to do. It just hasn't come to the top of the work list. As you know, our planning department is maxed, and it hasn't been seen as the highest work priority, but it's still on our list to do.
Okay, no, I apologize for the falling through the cracks.
No, I know.
It's just like you say, it was a priority. Well, we talked about it, and then it seemed to just kind of go away, and then this letter sort of brought it back to life again. So
it was directed by council, and it just has not become the #1 priority for the planning department. If council wants to redirect that, we can do that.
I wonder if it's worth having sort of I can't remember if we had a report on it or if we just had a delegation come and speak.
And we had both. We had a staff report, and Alberni Paving and the Fall Fair Association were in the room, and they spoke as well at the same time.
I guess before staff does any work on it, we probably should have that come back and just so that this council can update themselves on it and decide if a rezoning is still the route we want to take to move forward.
We'll bring a fresh report and bring the historical reports and seek council's direction.
Okay. And I don't think that needs to be done as a priority ahead of other planning things. I know our staff has a lot of work going on, but just before any work is put into it, I think it would make sense. Okay. Councillor Paulson?
When Mr. Somar from Alberni Paving addressed council, he was in the process of actually removing material from the site, and actually he was being prepared to move. I'm just wondering if he's even still there. I'll take a drive by there tomorrow. I'll go by there tomorrow.
Okay, so we have a motion to receive. Any further questions? All in favor? Carried. Item number 6 from Martin Van Holst, RCMP Day, Vernon Committee Chair, a letter dated February 28th, 2019, requesting a letter of support to move forward with a petition to acknowledge February 1st as Royal Canadian Mounted Police Appreciation Day. Would somebody like to make this motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni provide a letter of support to the RCMP Day Committee for their efforts to move forward with a petition to the provincial and federal governments to acknowledge February 1st as Royal Canadian Mounted Police Day.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. And item number 7 from Kevin Forsyth, Port Alberni Water Sports, a proposal to operate a windsurfing, kiteboarding, and stand-up paddleboard business at Alberni Harbour Quay. Council. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to make the motion?
Okay.
I move that the proposal to operate a windsurfing, kiteboarding, and stand-up paddleboarding business at the Alberni Harbour Quay be referred to staff to initiate contact and review options and opportunities with the proponent.
I second that.
Okay. And Councillor Paulson.
Just a comment. This young fellow, I'm pretty sure it's the same fellow, has run a rental operation in the Qualicum area, Parksville Qualicum area, and he runs a really clean, neat business, so he might be a good seasonal guy to have. And it's kind of neat seeing all that color on the water on a nice sunny day.
Yeah, I think it's very exciting for us to have somebody, I mean, I know we have some rental businesses in town, but somebody who wants to be on site. Looking forward to hearing what staff thinks of it. And I mean, it might be something that we want to consider putting out an RFP for someone to use one of our sites to operate this type of business.
Actually, he's bringing in a trailer, it sounds like.
Interesting. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Carried. And item 8 from the District of Highlands, Municipal Survivor Climate Challenge, an email dated March 5th, 2019, inviting Mayor and Council to participate in the Municipal Survivor Climate Challenge, a competition between municipal councillors challenging them to decrease the ecological footprint over the course of 1 year. Are there any questions on this? Councillor Solda.
So is this going to affect budget? Like, is it going to help the budget, or is it going to add on to the budget? I know you like challenges, Madam Mayor, so I'm just kind of curious to know how the picture would look.
What makes you think I like challenges? Hardly a competitive person. That's right. So I think this is really just for our awareness at this point. We aren't committing to doing anything, but it is interesting to take a look through. I actually spoke with my sister-in-law counselor in Comox, and they are doing a challenge. I'm not sure if it's this one or something similar to this, but they're mapping, like, how many trees they save by driving places instead of flying to conferences and things like that. So it is interesting, something for us to check out for sure. Somebody like to, or Councillor Solda, would you like to move that motion?
I'll move that the email dated March 5th, 2019, inviting Mayor and Council to participate in the Municipal Survivor Climate Challenge, competition between municipal councils, challenging them to decrease their ecological footprint over the course of 1 year, be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried. No proclamations, informational correspondence. City Clerk.
Just a few items, Madam Mayor. Minutes from the December 6th Food Security and Climate Disruption Committee. An email from Gary Lajeunesse offering ideas to increase tourism in the Alberni Valley. A letter from Peter Finch responding to the Fire Chief's previous letter and inquiring if Council has provided funding for interface fires in the 2019 budget. An email from Hart Hayden expressing concern regarding the Maplehurst Trail, and minutes from the February 6th Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission meeting.
Thank you. Would somebody like to move receipt of the informational correspondence?
So move, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
And any questions? Councillor Corbeil.
Just a question regarding the letter from Mr. Peter Finch. Is that something that should be, or has it already been forwarded to the regional district?
So does CAO, do you know if these letters from Peter Finch go to the regional district as well?
I haven't seen it.
Just out of
Madam Mayor, I don't see
curiosity.
that it's also addressed to the regional district, but we can forward it.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay, any other items that people want to highlight? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And no report from in camera. Item L, council reports. Any things people want to highlight specifically? Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I didn't have much time to report on my heritage meeting because it was past the deadline, but I just wanted to congratulate our former Fire Chief Pete Geddes on being elected to President of the Industrial Heritage Society, with Kevin Hunter staying on as vice and Mr. Paul Blake being the treasurer. And just to thank you two for attending that meeting and giving an explanation on the process, how we came to MMS and the Industrial Heritage Society and the train. So that's all I need to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson, anything to highlight?
No, I don't. I think it's pretty well summarized there.
That's great. Thank you. Councillor Solda?
I'm good.
Okay. Councillor Corbeil?
I'm good, thanks.
Councillor Boone? Okay. Would somebody like to move receipt of the reports?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Okay, and new business? Seeing nothing on the agenda, anything councillors wish to bring forward? None? Moving on to question period. An opportunity for members of the public to ask questions. And we have one left, so come forward.
Outweighted everybody.
You've earned your right to a question.
It's called stamina.
That's one thing. Just a question on, I'm a bit curious as to why we're spending some time on the Harbour View lands with all the needs that we have in the community that need developing or upgrading, etc. I always find when you go down there, there is a question. When you go down there, it's not unpleasant to look at that area. I love the trees, and somehow I think the city at times likes cutting more down. When you see communities, including North Vancouver, who are continually enhancing their communities by putting trees up in the loads. Anyway, so my first question is, why is there seems to be a need right now to develop that area? And one of the reasons I'm bringing that up is we're missing the biggest opportunity I think we have in this community in recognizing what we have at Lower Lonsdale and the Lonsdale Quay. We're not realizing the potential of the development there. A few years ago, we encouraged some developers to give some ideas on how we could do some changes on part of the quay, but there was restrictions that didn't encourage anyone to show a real interest. I think that whole area should be developed as a total area that provides access to there was questions back a few years ago too, we shouldn't be selling our water frontage. Communities can't afford to develop water frontage. Mm-hmm. And City Council has the option of complying or not with any developer's submissions. So to develop that and provide the access that the public need, etc., is to me a major priority for this community. To do a really great job of a development down there, it would open the corridor up to 3rd Avenue, and it would encourage businesses to open there. So saying that, I wonder why we're putting so much time into the harbour. I'd like to see that land left as it is, because if the city decides that there's something worth doing at the quay, and I think it's a #1 priority that will bring the whole community together, that land may be utilized as part of that project, although it's further back. We've made mistakes such as the area around the dike where we put that Ford dealership. I'm not buying a Ford, so I don't have to worry about it. The Ford dealership right smack in the middle of the city property there. And now after that, we went looking for a place to put a trailer park for one-night stays. We seem to piecemeal things. We're doing the clock tower. We put in the parking lot. I call it a parking lot with a little cover down at the quay. What a waste of money! It's just a glorified parking lot. We're piecemealing things together instead of tacking it, doing the big project, taking and putting something together that will draw people, a lot more people and tourists, etc. down there. So my question is, why are we looking at developing something that doesn't really need developing right now? We can leave it like we should have left the Ford dealership area. Leave it for a while till we see what's happening within the community. So I say leave it alone. I'd like to know why the city seems to be encouraging development of that area right now. It's not an eyesore.
So I can answer that, and thanks for your comments. And I think you make some great points, and I think those are topics we'll be talking about during our strategic planning coming up. I agree with you. I don't like the piecemeal approach that has at some points been taken. But what's driving this specifically is inquiries from developers for that property specifically. We haven't had inquiries for the Harbour Quay. Now that's not to say that if we put an RFP out, we wouldn't get successful or we wouldn't get applicants for it. So you do make a good point. But that is what is driving this process, is that we've had inquiries, and because it's a property that we know the community cares a lot about, we wanted to start a public engagement process to decide if there is an aptitude to do something with it at this time. So that's where we're at. But you followed the meeting today, so we haven't made any firm decisions. We're going to start the process of exploring an RFP.
And I guess so. My last comment to them, personally, I really don't care what the developers want. They're doing it for their own financial reasons. We have to look at the long-term benefit of developing that area that's going to enhance our community. And I hope that you'll look at the development of the Lower Lonsdale Quay as a prime project that we should be preparing for and looking forward to develop. I don't care about the developers. They want the property because there's a lot of money to be made on there, whatever they do. Anyway, thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for your questions. Okay.
Okay.
Would somebody like to move adjournment? Are we moving adjournment still if we're going back in camera? Yes. Okay, great. Is there a seconder? All in favor? Carried.